Chapter 13:13. The other Luo fan looked at the other cultivators on Luo fan's auspicious cloud and said, "Are these people here to challenge themselves? Apart from this, what are they doing on this island?" Luo fan chuckled. The two of them did not seem like they were going to fight to the death. Instead, they were like two best friends. There was no awkwardness in their conversation, and they were even smiling. In that case, I'll give them a hand. The other Luo fan smiled faintly. As he spoke, he raised his hand and made a grabbing motion in front of him. In an instant, an invisible wave spread out from his hand, instantly engulfing the entire island. It directly grabbed a certain existence that was in over 100 locations on the island that were separated by an unknown distance. The entire process was extremely mysterious and profound. Among the people present, apart from Luo fan, who could clearly see the mysteries he used during the process, the other cultivators could only see the same incomprehensible means that Luo fan had displayed when the island was formed. Apart from that, they did not gain anything. Then, among the over 100 people present, each of them disappeared on Luo fan's auspicious cloud. When they reappeared, they were already in a special space-time. And in this special space-time, apart from them, there was another existence that was the same as them. This existence had a faint aura that made them feel like they were looking at a mirror. This was very obvious. It was their duplicates. It was the other Luo fan who had opened up over 100 space-times and worlds in the blink of an eye. He had thrown the duplicates of the cultivators into those worlds with them. His intention was obviously to have them fight their duplicates fiercely in those worlds. After the other Luo fan was done, he smiled and said to Luo fan, "Is this okay?" Luo fan chuckled. He took a step forward and arrived on the wooden boat, standing less than 10 feet away from the other Luo fan. He said, "That's right. If I do it, it is the same." What he said was not a lie. If he was the one doing it, he would directly throw the cultivators and their clones into a separate world and let them fight on their own. There would be no bias. He wouldn't use any special methods to plot against the clones. He wanted to create some conditions for the cultivators who came with him to win. To him, those cultivators were simply too weak. It felt like participating in the battle between them was like two children fighting. Once a martial arts master saw it, he immediately joined the fight. This was what he thought. The other Luo fan was his clone. Although it was not the real Luo fan and was quite different from him, his way of thinking should not be too different. "What about us? How do you plan to fight? Are we going to fight here?" Another Luo fan asked. "Fight here? If you want to destroy this island, you can do that." Luo fan naturally shook his head and said. Luo fan was now a level 3 pseudo-sage. When such an existence erupted with power, even a world would not be able to withstand it. Although this island was large, and it was a trial ground built by the sage, it was still impossible for it to withstand his power. Under such circumstances, if the two Luo fans were to start a fierce battle here, then the final result would be very obvious. The island would be wiped out by the aftermath of their battle. All the living beings on the island would disappear completely, and even the entire island would be flattened in an instant. This was not what Luo fan or the other Luo fan wanted to see. The reason why the other Luo fan did not want to see was simple. After all, he was created by the sage. After the sage created him, he gave him the responsibility to defeat the other island together with this island. If this island was erased because of their battle, how would they take responsibility for it? The reason why Luo fan did not want to see this was even simpler. If he wiped out this island, then who would he use the method of directly surrendering during the battle that he had previously set? Without a target to fight, was he supposed to surrender to the air? If he could not surrender, did that mean he had to join the sage and fight for the sage? Luo fan and his clone had the same memories and the same power. Naturally, the two of them were very clear on what they were thinking. It was because they knew each other very well. That was the reason why the two of them were so peaceful and coexisting so harmoniously. Luo fan did not have to worry that the other party would do something he did not want to see, and the other party did not have to worry that Luo Fan would start a massacre. "Let's each create a world," Luo Fan said with a smile after thinking for a while. The other Luo Fan knew what Luo Fan meant in an instant and smiled. "That's good too. We don't have to fight to decide the winner. It's a pity. If you could really exist for a long time, maybe we could become good friends." Luo Fan sighed. Conversing with this other version of himself was like conversing with someone whose heart and soul were connected to his. Even the slightest change in expression or change in language could be instantly understood by the other party. This kind of feeling, even for him, gave him an inexplicable sense of satisfaction, and he felt completely relaxed. This is only temporary. If I can exist for a long time, as time goes by, the difference between the two of us will become bigger and bigger. At some point, we will really become two completely different people. At that time, this feeling of being connected to each other will never appear again. So, there's nothing to regret. The other Luo Fan sighed. Obviously, he also felt a little regretful. For this kind of thing, Luo Fan thought for a while and already understood. It determined a living being's temperament and thoughts. Apart from the natural foundation of living beings, it was also the many encounters of living beings. No matter how firm a person's Taoist heart was, as they experienced more and more things, their temperament and thoughts would unknowingly change. So, even if the current Luo Fan and his clone were completely the same, as they experienced more and more different things, when they were in different positions for a longer period of time, their temperament and thoughts would naturally diverge. In the end, they would become two completely different individuals. They would no longer have anything in common. This was an inevitable trend of development, even if this trend might take a very long time. Only then could it develop to a completely different stage after sighing for a while. The two of them restrained their emotions at the same time. They raised their hands and pointed forward. In an instant, 4 mysterious existences rushed out from their hands. These 4 mysterious existences. They were the 4 basic existences of time, space, matter, and energy. After they were created by the 2 Luo Fans, they began to construct in front of them. From nothing to something, from simple to detailed, they gradually constructed 2 worlds. Obviously, the world creation method they had used was not an ordinary one, like the one they had used to casually create over 100 worlds. Instead, it was the most detailed and profound world creation method they had comprehended when passing the Buddha Supreme's test. Compared to casually creating a world with a finger, this method was more complicated, mysterious, and required more skills. But at the same time, the world constructed in this way had a great advantage in terms of level compared to the world that was randomly created. As long as Luo Fan was capable enough and spent enough time, he might be able to directly construct a world that was infinitely close to a perfect world. Of course, even if it was infinitely close to a perfect world, it was not truly a perfect world. The slightest difference determined that the world they created could not be truly equal to a perfect world. It could not be truly formed in a state of chaos. It determined that the world was still a vast thousand world. Even if it was a vast thousand world that was countless times more powerful than an ordinary vast thousand world, it was still a vast thousand world. Therefore, it was impossible to rely on this method to directly obtain the ability to survive in a state of chaos after the destruction of the Earth's universe and obtain the same characteristics as a sage through another method. More importantly, even if he wanted to create a world that was infinitely close to a perfect world, it would still take a terrifying amount of time for the current Luo Fan. It could be calculated in tens of billions of years, or even hundreds of billions of years. In the beginning, the 2 Luo Fans' method of creating the world was extremely synchronized. It was like the inside and outside of a mirror. Seeing the construction of one world, one could guess the construction of the other world. However, with the passage of time, the 2 worlds gradually deviated from one another. Even if they had the same memories, the same magic power, and the same cultivation, they were 2 different people after all. The difference between them caused the two of them to gradually develop different thoughts and different inspirations through different experiences. Naturally, the world that they constructed would also deviate accordingly. At this moment, Luo Fan did not care about what the other Luo Fan was doing at all. He focused all his attention on the world in front of him. Time, space, matter, and energy, these four basic existences were changing, intertwining, twisting, and combining crazily under his control. Gradually, they constructed all the existences needed for a complete world. He directly used these four basic existences to create a world. This was a method of constructing a world that he had comprehended after passing the 3 rounds of the Buddha Supreme's test. Most of the mysteries used were actually what he had considered when he passed the 2nd round of test, and they were also what he had used in the 4 strange worlds. For Luo Fan, constructing the world in this way was equivalent to constantly scooping out buckets of water from a reservoir. The mysteries used were simply a very small part of the mysteries that he had mastered. And it was precisely because this was only a very, very small part of it that Luo Fan was able to generate countless inspirations through continuous association, continuously integrating more and more mysteries into the process of creating the world, causing the world to become more and more mysterious. It became more and more stable, stronger and stronger. Its level also became higher and higher. In the beginning, when the world was barely formed and had all the existences of a normal world, it was just a minor kiliacosm. However, as time passed, after an hour, it had already been upgraded to the level of a minor kiliacosm. After another hour, it had been upgraded to the level of a minor kiliacosm. At the beginning, in the minor kiliacosm, the worlds created by the 2 Luo Fan were basically exactly the same. They both looked like a vast universe. However, when that world was upgraded to the level of a minor kiliacosm, the worlds created by the 2 of them were different. This difference caused the stars between the 2 universes to appear. There was a big difference. The number of planets with life appeared. There were also more and less of them, and there were many similarities and differences in their positions. When the 2 worlds were upgraded to the level of a minor kiliacosm, the difference was huge. It was so huge that the 2 worlds had already become 2 completely different universes. Even the prevailing civilizations between the 2 universes had become completely different. The one created by Luo Fan was a prevailing civilization of cultivation, while the other one created by Luo Fan was a civilization of science and technology. However, despite these similarities and differences, the level of the 2 worlds was still constantly improving. The civilizations of the 2 universes were also becoming more and more powerful as their constructions improved. Time passed day by day. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed. During this year, the 2 of them had been constantly building these 2 worlds, trying their best to strengthen these 2 worlds and upgrade the level of these 2 worlds. Although a year had passed, these 2 worlds still belonged to the category of a minor kiliacosm. Moreover, they still hadn't reached the limit that the 2 of them could strengthen. It would take at least hundreds of millions of years to reach the limit that they could reach. However, on this day, the 2 Luo Fans coincidentally stopped at the same time. It was not because the 2 of them had a telepathic connection and felt that they should stop. Instead, the 2 of them felt at the same time that among the more than 100 worlds created by the other Luo Fan, the battle in one of the worlds had already been decided. What a pity! Luo Fan sighed. The other Luo Fan smiled and nodded without saying a word. In the world where the battle was decided, the one who won was the clone, and the one who lost was the original body that Luo Fan had brought to the other island. With a soft bang, that world was suddenly annihilated. A man whose entire body was in tatters and no longer looked like a human rushed out of that world. After he appeared, he let out a long roar toward the sky. There was an indescribable pain and inexplicable relief in his voice. The other Luo Fan waved his hand, and the cultivator's body shook. In the blink of an eye, he recovered from his original tattered appearance to his peak state. With this help, the cultivator returned to his senses. He bowed to the other Luo Fan, turned into a ray of light and directly left the lake. Luo Fan shook his head and said to the other Luo Fan, "Even they have a winner. How about we have a winner too?" Naturally, they could not wait hundreds of millions of years until they had raised the two worlds to their limits to determine the winner. Even if there was a huge difference in the flow of time in this test and the outside world, and the long years in the test were only equivalent to an extremely short time in the outside world, they could not waste time like this. Since this was the case, it was naturally fine to stop at any time to determine the winner. This time was not a special time and did not have any special meaning, but since they were interrupted, what harm was there in determining the winner? The other Luo Fan only smiled and said, "That's what I was thinking." With that, he pushed the world in front of him towards Luo Fan. When Luo Fan saw this, he also raised his hand and pushing the world he had created towards the other party. The two worlds came into contact in an instant. In an instant, a terrifying shock wave was emitted from the point of contact, spreading out in all directions. At this moment, the two Luo Fans attacked at the same time. With a sweep of their hands, they cleared away the terrifying shock waves that erupted from the contact between the two worlds, causing the two shock waves to not cause any damage to their surroundings at all. They only stirred up slight fluctuations in the lake below. At this time, the two worlds were like two water balls that were gradually fusing. There were more and more overlaps, and in a short while, the two worlds had completely become one, becoming a sphere that appeared between the two of them. This was how the two of them would determine the winner of the two worlds. Let the two worlds fuse by themselves, and wait until the end to see which world had the upper hand, and which world occupied the main body. It seems that there is not much difference between them. The other Luo Fan watched the process of the two worlds fusing, and could not help but show a look of pity on his face. Of course, the time needed for the two worlds to completely fuse together would not be so short. No matter how fast it would take at least a few days for the two worlds to complete the fusion and determine the winner between the two of them. However, even if the fusion was not completed, it was not a problem for the two Luo Fan to see the general trend of the fusion of the two worlds. Chapter 13-14. Between the two of them, the world formed by the two worlds was undergoing earth-shattering changes. These two worlds both had the appearance of a universe, but their essence was fundamentally different. This difference caused the two worlds to clash intensely the moment they came into contact. The laws of the two worlds were like two giant beasts, fighting and devouring each other. Both sides were constantly being devoured by each other during this process, and at the same time, they were also devouring each other. In this incomparably tragic state, the two worlds were gradually moving towards a new equilibrium, a new structure that contained the respective characteristics of both worlds. Since the two worlds were so complete, there were naturally countless living beings in each of them. The countless living beings joined the evolution of the two worlds at this time, facing each other, also carrying out an extremely tragic battle. The extremely advanced civilization of science and technology and the civilization of cultivation were like two things that could not be broken in at all, working hard to break in. Almost at every moment, an unknown number of living beings died in the process. Due to the fact that the two were evenly matched, the process of breaking in was particularly bitter. In the end, the two worlds formed a brand new stable structure, forming a brand new world. All living beings in that world, whether it was the civilization of cultivation or the civilization of science and technology, all died. The entire world that was twice as wide as before became a dead universe. And the result, obviously, as the two of them had seen before, in this universe, the world that belonged to the two sides created by Luo Fan's side was divided equally. Neither of the two worlds had the ability to suppress the other world. Between the two sides, they were completely evenly matched. Seeing this change, although the two Luo Fans' faces did not show any expression of surprise, they both felt that it was a pity, because this meant that, previously, they wanted to use peaceful means to determine the winner and the loser. But they had already failed. The two of them looked at each other. Without saying anything, the two of them stepped forward at the same time, directly entering the world that they had created together. This world, it looked like the void of the universe, the flow of time in the entire world. It was many times faster than the outside world. Although from the outside, the two worlds had just merged into one, and the living beings in the world had just been completely wiped out. But when the two of them entered this world, they discovered that the entire world was no longer deathly silent. Every corner of the world was enveloped in an invisible and indescribable vitality. This formless vitality had given birth to countless life forms on the many planets in the universe. Some of these creatures were born with the appearance of cultivators and possessed extraordinary abilities. Some, on the other hand, possessed extraordinary intelligence and instinctively began to develop a technological civilization. However, compared to the time when the two worlds were still separated, the living beings born in this world were different from each other. But it was no longer as extreme as before. Moreover, they were no longer so far apart from each other. Instead, they were born directly on the same planet. It was obvious that this was the phenomenon formed after the two worlds fused together. This meant that after the two worlds fused, they became more inclusive, more complete, more powerful, and more stable. The two Luo fans floated in the starry sky of the universe, facing each other from a distance. The regretful expression on their faces gradually disappeared. Previously, they had each opened up a world and compared the strength of this world. Their direct goal was naturally to use the power of this world to see the difference in strength between them and see if they could use a peaceful method to determine the winner and loser. But it was also to create a battlefield for the battle between the two of them. Just as mentioned before, if the shock waves from their battle weren't restricted, the entire island would be completely destroyed by the shock waves from their battle. This was obviously not in their best interests. Therefore, they obviously needed a place to provide space for the two of them to fight in order to avoid causing damage to the island. It was also because of this goal that they had chosen the idea of opening up a world to determine the victor among so many peaceful methods. With a slight thought in Luo Fan's heart, the halo behind his head trembled slightly. In an instant, everything in the entire universe directly entered his heart, allowing him to directly control everything in the universe. At this moment, he also felt an inexplicable sense sweep through the range of the universe he sensed. In an instant, Luo Fan knew that this was the means of the other Luo Fan. The other Luo Fan also used the same method to control everything in the universe. After understanding this, Luo Fan raised his eyes and looked at the other Luo Fan. At the same time, he saw that the other party was also looking at him. For a moment, the two of them smiled slightly. Before they finished smiling, the two of them raised their hands and slapped at each other at the same time. In an instant, the extremely powerful forces collided in the middle, producing a terrifying impact. In an instant, half of the universe was shattered by the shock wave produced by the collision of their palms. All the matter that made up the stars and planets directly mixed together, turning half of the universe into a strange area that seemed to be covered in a dense fog. In addition, the two Luo Fan also directly sensed that in the depths of this world, the rules and laws layer, time, space, matter, energy, and other existences were also receiving intense vibrations, as if they could completely collapse at any time and then mix with the strange fog that covered half of the universe. Such a situation was within the expectations of the two Luo Fans. At the beginning of the battle, the two of them would have made the same choice. Only with the passage of time, as the battle continued, as their inspirations continued to burst forth, and as the battle became more and more intense, the differences between them gradually revealed themselves. Only then did they gradually reveal some differences in their methods. It was just like how the two of them had opened up their own worlds. In the beginning, the worlds that they had opened up were exactly the same, but as time went on, the worlds that they had opened up gradually changed. However, as they continued to perfect that world, as they continued to change that world, the two worlds finally became two completely different universes. Because of this reason, they were now using the same method and the same power, the same attack strength, That was extremely normal. As for the two of them, obviously they had also thought of this. At the moment when their attacks annihilated each other, they did not hesitate for even a millionth of a second and directly attacked again. The types of magic powers that Luo Fan possessed were unimaginable. Moreover, he could create billions of magic powers and techniques with just a raise of his hand and a single move. At this moment, he displayed them without any scruples. That scene was truly magnificent and vast beyond everyone's imagination. The entire universe was completely enveloped in the endless magic powers at this moment. In just a few short breaths, the entire universe was shattered and reshaped thousands of times. In the process, the many living creatures that had originally been born in this universe were also completely erased and recreated tens of thousands of times. An inexplicable sense of carefreeness gradually emerged in Luo Fan's heart. This feeling of being able to unleash his abilities and methods without any worries, without worrying about whether his opponent's strength far exceeded his own, and the feeling of being able to destroy his methods and body in a way that he couldn't understand was truly an unprecedented experience for him. And it made him feel an indescribable sense of joy. At this moment, Luo Fan was extremely glad that he had come here. He was glad that he had arranged for the unification of the entire island back then, thus triggering the sage's test and creating an identical version of himself to fight with him. This was what he thought. Thinking about it, the other Luo Fan on the opposite side should also be thinking the same thing. This process continued continuously. 1 month, 2 months, 1 year, 2 years. In the first few months, the power of the two Luo Fans' magic powers was almost exactly the same. Almost every time they used their magic powers, they would annihilate each other. Every time they used their methods, they would come into contact with each other at the same time, resulting in a terrifying shockwave that swept across the universe. It would either cause terrifying damage to the universe or recover the damage caused to the universe previously. In short, the effect was extremely obvious and shocking. However, as time passed, after a few months, the difference between the two of them gradually began to show. The divine abilities that they used gradually became different, and the methods that they chose to deal with each other in the same state also gradually deviated a little. This deviation was not huge in the beginning, and both of them could predict it. When they fought, their states were not much different from the first few months. However, this difference continued to grow as time continued to pass. After a few years, the difference in their choices had already reached an extremely shocking level. It directly caused the two Luo Fans to become two completely different people. No matter what choice they made, the magic powers that they used at any particular moment were no longer similar. Because of this difference, the battle between the two of them became even more intense, and also became even more unpredictable. This kind of battle also began to look like a real battle. The suspense of the battle between the two of them also began to increase. Even if both of them had the same strength and cultivation, in a battle, it might not necessarily be a draw. Different choices made at different times, different judgments made at different times, all of these would affect the final outcome of the battle. In other words, in this kind of battle between two existences with similar cultivation, the final outcome would depend on how the other party performed. As the difference between the two of them grew larger, Luo Fan became more and more immersed in the battle. All of his wisdom was boiling. All the magic powers that he had learned and created over the years continuously emerged from the depths of his memory during this process. At the same time, countless magic powers were created at the same time. Everything in the outside world. The change of time gradually left him. In his eyes, there was only the existence of the Luo Fan that was exactly the same as him. In his heart, there were only countless mysteries of the great Tao, countless truths of heaven and earth, as well as the countless magic powers and techniques that were born from them. As this process continued, the gap between the two Luo Fans began to gradually show. That was the clone of Luo Fan. In this process, he gradually fell into a disadvantageous position. The battle gradually turned in the direction of Luo Fan's favor. The reason for this was very simple. That was the clone of Luo Fan. Although everything was exactly the same as Luo Fan, whether it was the memory or cultivation, or the power of magic powers. Even the magic treasures and everything else he had were all the same. However, compared to Luo Fan, he still had some differences. The difference was that everything he had was directly created by a saint-level existence through his own means. Everything that Luo Fan had was obtained through his own efforts, bit by bit. This difference would not have any effect on anything under normal circumstances. One could not even see the difference between the two. However, when their wisdom was stimulated to the limit and their fighting instincts were raised to the peak, this kind of difference would be extremely obvious. The reason was very simple. The directly created memories, cultivation, and strength were directly achieved, so there was no continuity with everything in the past. At the same realm, he would naturally be able to perform extremely well, but when he needed to follow these memories, these cultivation, these strength to develop again, to rise again, what he had directly achieved would become lacking in strength. To put it in a straightforward way, it was like Luo Fan's memories of the great heaven primordial world. Because Luo Fan had personally experienced the memories, these memories were incomparably fresh to him. They were connected to everything in his body. Who knew when, due to some encounter, memories that he did not have before would be stimulated, and thus provide some assistance to the magic powers and techniques he was currently creating. As for the other Luo Fan who had directly created these memories, because he did not directly experience the great heaven primordial world, he could only use these memories. Even if the saint had completely replicated everything about Luo Fan, including the memories of his body, it was still much more difficult to stimulate the memories than it was for Luo Fan. In other words, with the same experience, perhaps Luo Fan could stimulate the same memories, but for the other Luo Fan, the stimulation was not enough. It would take a few more times for it to be stimulated. This kind of subtle difference would continue to accumulate, and in the end, the gap would become bigger and bigger, more and more terrifying. In the end, it would cause the originally balanced situation between the two of them to change, causing the two of them, who were originally equal in strength and cultivation, to have a bigger and bigger gap in strength. Because of this, Luo Fan was gradually suppressing the other him, causing the direction of victory to tilt more and more in his favor, from tilting in the direction of victory and defeat until a winner was decided. 1,000 years had passed since then. After 1,000 years, the universe that the two of them had created had turned into a paste. It looked gray, and even time and space had become extremely chaotic, as if it did not exist at all. At this time, Luo Fan's entire body was already in tatters. There were scars all over his body. Looking at his appearance, it was as if he had been smashed tens of thousands of times and reformed tens of thousands of times in the blink of an eye. Each time, only a tiny trace was left. Each time, it was only a tiny trace. After accumulating for tens of thousands of times, of course, it was in its current state. Luo Fan was like this, but the other Luo Fan was in an even worse state. At this moment, as he stood there, the scars all over his body were many times more numerous than Luo Fan's. More importantly, his entire body was emitting an inexplicable death chi. It was as if he was already dead, and his entire body had turned into the tiniest particles. The reason why he was maintaining his human form was only because a powerful obsession was binding his body, and the feeling of his entire body constantly seeping out. "I won," Luo Fan said with some disappointment. Instant. Even a saint can't change this fact." The other Luo Fan sighed and said. Luo Fan could know the difference between the original body and the clone, so he could also think of this. At this time, he naturally knew the reason for his defeat. Who knows? Perhaps a saint has the ability to change it, but they just didn't use it on you. With our realm, trying to guess a saint's divine ability is like trying to guess the feeling of a summer insect, trying to guess the feeling of ice. It's really a bit ridiculous, Luo Fan said with a bitter smile. The other Luo Fan heard this, shook his head, and sighed. That's right. This is where the tragedy lies. Existences like us really have too little understanding of saints. What abilities a saint has, what they don't have, what they can do, and what they can't do, all of these can only be guessed. And after guessing, we don't even know if it's right or wrong. Even if there are 10,000 reasons to tell you that you're right, you can't be sure if these reasons are true or if the saints are purposely showing them. And existences like us, based on such information, seek to reach the realm that we can't even understand, to become existences that we can't even guess at. How tragic. Chapter 13:15. As the other Luo fan collapsed, this universe, which had already turned into a chaotic state, also gradually collapsed and turned into nothingness. A lake gradually appeared in front of Luo fan. Even though nearly 1,000 years had passed in that world, it was still a long time ago. However, to the outside world, only a few years had passed since the two Luo fan entered that world to fight. This lake had not changed much compared to before. Even the ordinary wooden boat looked exactly the same as before. However, it was not as if nothing had changed. At the very least, the original 100 or so worlds had been reduced to only a few at this time. It was very obvious that most of the cultivators that had come to this island with Luo fan had already won against their clones. As for the specific outcome, Luo fan did not care. There had to be some victories and some defeats. As for the victors, whether it was the cultivators that came with Luo fan or the clones on the island, they all left after the victor was decided. Not a single one of them stayed. At the instant that Luo fan came out, another world shattered and a figure appeared before Luo fan. This figure was covered in wounds, and his mental state was extremely fatigued. With one look, Luo fan knew that he was the cultivator who had come to the duplicate island with him. In other words, he was the original cultivator. After the cultivator came out, his eyes were slightly dazed. After a long while, only then did he regain his senses. In the worlds created by the other Luo fan, the flow of time was also different from the outside world. A year in the outside world was equivalent to many years in that world. They had entered that world a few years ago, and it was obvious that the years they had experienced were counted in thousands of years. After thousands of years of war, he couldn't help but feel a little lost after returning to a state of peace. However, he was a powerful cultivator after all. Even though he was only a minor accomplishment quasi-sage, he was still a powerful cultivator. Although he was only a minor accomplishment quasi-sage, his Tao heart was already extremely tough. Very soon, the cultivator came back to his senses and bowed to Luo fan. He said, "Thank you, Senior, for giving me this opportunity. I hope that you will be successful in the future. It must be because of this opportunity. You fought for it yourself. Make good use of it," Luo fan said calmly. The cultivator bowed once more. After bowing to Luo fan, he turned around and turned into a long rainbow. He left the place and disappeared in front of Luo fan. Luo fan only said that he would give them a chance, but he didn't say that he would take them back to that island. At this time, since they had obtained this opportunity and fought with their replicas, it was naturally impossible for them to stay by Luo fan's side and wait for him to take them back. Even if some cultivators had different thoughts and wanted to stay, it was impossible for them to be thick-skinned enough to stay in such an empty scene. Luo fan didn't care about his departure. His expression didn't change, and he just waited quietly. The remaining few worlds before him were all under his control at this moment. With just a thought, he had gained complete control of these worlds and knew everything that had happened in these worlds over a period of time. This wasn't hard to understand. These worlds were originally created by the other Luo fan. When the other Luo fan created these worlds, his mentality, memories, thoughts, abilities, and power were exactly the same as Luo fan's. Since that was the case, after the other Luo fan died, Luo fan would naturally be able to take over these worlds with just a thought. It was as if he had created these worlds. With a thought, after seeing all the remaining worlds clearly, Luo fan couldn't help but sigh. Among these worlds, among the cultivators that Luo fan had brought, only 2 of them could defeat their clones. The remaining few were just struggling at death's door. Not long after, they would be killed by the clones' attack. Their souls would scatter, and even all traces of their existence would be erased. Sensing this, Luo Fan just shook his head and turned to leave. Although those cultivators came to this island with him, it didn't mean that Luo Fan had to be responsible for their lives. The battle between them and their clones was the result of their own choice. Since it was their own choice, they naturally had to bear the result of the battle, enjoy victory, and feel defeat. With a single step, he traversed an unknown number of trillions of kilometers in an instant. From the lake at the center of the island, he instantly returned to the lake at the center of the main island. He also appeared on the wooden boat. Compared to before the battle with the clone, Luo Fan's strength had increased by quite a bit. Moreover, the power of his spells had become much more exquisite due to the burst of inspiration and intelligence. His methods of using laws were also much more exquisite than before. Because of this change, he was able to easily cross the two huge islands and the unimaginably vast ocean between the two islands. Although he only directly crossed it, the moment he passed through the duplicate island, he discovered that the duplicate island was undergoing a terrifying integration process. All the power on the entire island was gradually gathering, ready to head to the main island at any time. Different from the duplicate island, the original island was peaceful and tranquil. Compared to before, there was no difference at all. It was as if they were still in the demon world and not participating in the trial set up by the saint. They were not at risk of being attacked by another island that was exactly the same as this one at any time. At a glance, Luo Fan knew that the Ling Kingdom's emperor had long placed his hopes on his method. He was ready to surrender to another island at any time. However, these things did not matter at all to the current Luo Fan. Naturally, the Ling Kingdom's emperor and other cultivators would deal with them. When Luo Fan returned to the wooden boat, he began to close his eyes again and carefully comprehend the colorless and transparent halo behind his head, savoring the mystery of the primitive world in the halo. Compared to before the battle with the clone, Luo Fan had more inspiration at this moment, and his wisdom seemed to be more profound. Many problems that would have taken him a long time to deduce and solve were now clear at a glance. There were countless mysteries that he could not understand at all. At this moment, traces of clues began to appear. Through his understanding of the primitive world, Luo Fan had a deeper understanding of the uniqueness of the demon world. In a trance, he suddenly understood how the 54 differences between the great Tao of the demon world and the great Tao of the primitive world came about. There were billions of differences between the great Tao of the demon world and the great Tao of the primitive world. But between these differences, in summary, there were 54 origins. This was what Luo Fan had spent endless energy to deduce. It might also contain how the 54 sages of the Devil Realm became sages. It also contained the mystery of why this primitive world was called an opportunity to become a saint by the Buddhist Supreme. However, before this, Luo Fan's eyes seemed to be covered by a layer of fog. No matter how hard he tried to think and search, he could not find the root of it, nor could he know what was going on. But now, that incomprehensible thing suddenly appeared in front of Luo Fan, as if it was common sense that had long been lying there. The 54 different origins between the great Tao of the demon world and the great Tao of the primitive world were clearly the result of the 54 saints completely connecting their own great Tao with the great Tao of the demon world. It was precisely because they had connected their own great ways with the great ways of the Devil Realm that there were 54 kinds of changes in the Devil Realm. As a result, the great ways of the entire Devil Realm were gradually changed, causing so many subtle changes in the great ways of the Devil Realm. Even Luo Fan boldly speculated that perhaps it was because the saints connected their own great Tao with the great Tao of the demon world that they became saints. That was what allowed them to possess such an incredible divine ability and obtain such a supreme trait of being eternally indestructible and indestructible. This seemed to be somewhat contradictory to the Tao Master Realm cultivators being able to manifest all their cultivation achievements, leaving the great Tao of the natural world and overriding the great Tao. But in fact, this couldn't be simpler. Cultivation was a continuous process of reincarnation. For any cultivator, After reaching the pinnacle of each realm, they would break through and step into the beginning of another realm. Then, the beginning would continue to rise until they reached another pinnacle, waiting to step into the beginning of the next realm. According to this cultivation principle, when a cultivator was in the Tao Master realm, he would pursue his own great Tao to transcend the great Tao of the natural world, and finally connect his own great Tao with the great Tao of the natural world. However, these were only two levels in the process of cultivation, and there was no contradiction. Of course, this did not mean that directly putting one's own great Tao into the great Tao of the natural world was equivalent to becoming a saint. According to Luo Fan's current understanding, when the saints connected their own great Tao with the great Tao of the demon world, it was as if the great Tao of the demon world had grown limbs. Although it was rooted in the great Tao of the natural world, it was not the same as the great Tao of the natural world and had relative independence. However, directly putting the condensed great Tao into the great Tao of the natural world was equivalent to giving up one's own cultivation achievements and letting the great Tao of the natural world assimilate the condensed great Tao. There was only one inevitable consequence of doing so, and that was that the person would become the puppet of the great Tao, lose all self, and become the incarnation of the great Tao at the level of living beings. So, it's like this. No wonder the saints of the demon world can't be compared to the 7 great saints of the Earth universe. Luo Fan thought about this and suddenly sighed in his heart. Turning one's own great Tao into the limbs of the great Tao of the natural world and connecting with it could retain all the power of the great Tao of the natural world at will and also have the consequences of having extreme independence. But at the same time, it also made the saints inseparable from the world. It formed a close relationship where one would suffer and the other would prosper. Could this still be considered as a saint? The saints were supposed to be eternal and indestructible. They were great existences that would not be destroyed even if the world was destroyed, and they would not be destroyed if the world was damaged. Now that they were in this world, they could obtain almost omnipotent and omniscient. They had the terrifying ability to know everything. As long as the world was not destroyed, they would exist forever and would not be harmed by any force. But once the world was destroyed, they would die along with the world. They would not even have the ability to move to another perfect world to survive. Such existences, how could they still be called a real saint? The pseudo-saint realm, the pseudo-saint realm. Perhaps these saints are the real pseudo-saints. Luo Fan sighed and instantly lost any interest in using the opportunity left by the Buddha to become a saint. Not to mention that he knew that after more than 3 billion years, the entire Earth universe would collapse and shatter into endless fragments due to the arrival of the great tribulation of heaven and earth. It might even affect those saints and cause the death of countless saints. Even if he did not know this, with his ambition, he would not be willing to be shackled in the demon realm and be a so-called saint who could not even leave the demon realm at will. In fact, after he guessed how the demon realm saint became a saint, he already had a general idea of how to use the primitive world to become a demon realm saint. The nature of the primitive world was still unknown to Luo Fan, but its appearance was actually like the newly born demon realm. Even its grand Tao was the same as the demon realm that had just been born. Under such circumstances, Luo Fan, who had obtained absolute authority in the primitive world, could naturally experiment and find a way to place his condensed great Tao on the great Tao of the primitive world, which was the great Tao of the demon realm. In the end, when he could finally do this perfectly, he would naturally be able to directly place his condensed great Tao on the real great Tao of the demon realm, and thus give himself a chance to become a demon realm saint. Of course, this was only a rough guess. Even if he wanted to become a demon realm saint with the help of the primitive world, there would definitely be many difficulties. Even if Luo Fan could think of the opinions of the other 54 sages, such as the changes between the great Tao of the demon realm and the primitive world because of the existence of the 54 sages, the method to find might be quite troublesome and might require endless complicated means. Even if he succeeded in the end, he might need many means to maintain it, and so on. It might be complicated beyond his imagination. Sighing in his heart, Luo Fan had already decided that he could no longer hang the halo behind his head carelessly. To him, the primitive world was only an existence that helped him cultivate. Using the primitive world to become a demon realm saint was not too tempting to him. However, it was different for other cultivators. If there were cultivators who knew this method and were interested in it, the result could be imagined when they saw the halo. It would definitely be an extremely tragic battle of life and death. Luo Fan was not willing to fight to the death for the sake of this halo. Thinking of this, Luo Fan had a thought. Countless changes appeared in this world, and these endless changes eventually pointed to the void a few feet in front of Luo Fan. Among these changes, a half-step pseudo-sage treasure appeared in front of him. It was he who directly activated the second level of the law of causality and created another half-step pseudo-sage treasure. This half-step pseudo-holy treasure was completely different from the half-step pseudo-holy treasure that he had created before. It was in the shape of a copper mirror. This bronze mirror was only the size of a human head. There were no decorations on it, and both sides were extremely flat. It looked very simple. After this half-step pseudo-sage treasure was formed, Luo Fan thought of something, and the colorless and transparent halo behind his head suddenly shrank and directly crashed into the surface of the bronze mirror. As the halo crashed into it, the bronze mirror suddenly shook violently. Boundless light and shadows appeared on the surface of the mirror in an instant, producing billions of strange colors, illuminating the surface of the mirror as if it was a space-time passageway. As the mirror's surface changed, the mirror's aura also started to rise drastically. The aura of the half-step pseudo-sage treasure began to be replaced by the aura of a true pseudo-sage treasure. Obviously, the integration of the halo had allowed a half-step pseudo-sage treasure that had just been born to break through its limit and become a level 1 pseudo-sage treasure. As the aura of the level 1 pseudo-sage treasure stabilized on the treasure, the light and shadows on the surface of the mirror also stabilized. It transformed into a vast world, a primitive world filled with the civilization of the Buddhist Tao. It was filled with vitality and the mysteries of the Buddhist Tao. After such a change, this mirror was more like a Buddhist country established by a Buddha than a treasure. After doing all this, Luo Fan was finally relieved. Chapter 13:16. In the Demon Realm. After the island where the Ling Kingdom was located disappeared, the island once again appeared in the boundless sea. However, compared to a moment ago, the entire island had undergone an earth-shattering change. The entire island was filled with traces of battle. Even the living beings on the island had lost a significant amount of their lives. This number of living beings, when added up, was a population that could be calculated in the trillions. The originally unified Ling Kingdom had been completely broken up in the process, turning into countless small forces. It was almost a repeat of the situation when the entire island was divided into tens of thousands of countries. At this moment, on the lake at the center of the island, Luo Fan was the same as before. He was also sitting on the wooden boat with his eyes closed, comprehending the bronze mirror that had appeared in his hand. For the demon realm, only a moment had passed. However, in reality, tens of thousands of years had already passed since the sage's test on this island. That's right, tens of thousands of years had passed. Back then, according to Luo Fan's calculations, as long as the main island took the initiative to admit defeat the moment the two island armies came into contact, the battle and the test would end. However, it was a pity that the reality was not as he had imagined. In other words, it was the same as what he had expected at the beginning, but the subsequent development was beyond Luo Fan's expectations. 10 years after entering the trial space, the clone island had gathered billions of troops and finally attacked the main island. As for the Ling Kingdom's emperor, just like the solution that Luo Fan had given back then, he directly went forward and handed over the surrender form outside the island, indicating that he had admitted defeat and that victory belonged to the clone. At that time, The clone was extremely surprised. After discussing for a few months, they finally decided to accept the surrender form. They put away the surrender form, as well as the imperial seal of the Ling Kingdom's emperor and many other items that represented sovereignty. Then, they naturally retreated. They returned to their homeland, which was the Clone Island. Originally, in Luo fans' expectation, this test should be like this. Soon, they would be able to leave the trial space. However, after this, after a full 10 years, the Ling Nation Emperor realized that he was still in the trial space. Moreover, this island should have been able to produce its own resources and population, but now it couldn't. The entire island seemed to have been fixed at a certain time. For a full 10 years, who knew how many trillions of newborns should have appeared, but not a single one appeared. Moreover, they had not left the trial space at all. They were still in the trial space, facing the island that was far away from them. This made them realize that this method could not avoid war at all. There was no way to pass the trial. After knowing this, the living beings on both the original island and the clone island began to lose their composure. Under such circumstances, the Ling Nation's emperor no longer had the intention to consult Luo Fan. Instead, he took the initiative to launch a battle against the clone island. He took the initiative to gather an army, cross the distant sea, and attack the clone island. At that time, the island of the clone was already prepared. The moment the two sides came into contact, the battle became extremely tragic. No one could easily suppress the other. Because both sides were prepared, and sometimes it was the clone island's home ground, the result was obvious. That attack did not end the battle. After a few years, the power of the original island was scattered, and the remaining remnants were directly beaten back, returning to their original island. Such a tragic failure naturally made the Ling Nation Emperor furious. However, in contrast to this failure, after the outbreak of the war, the time on the two islands that seemed to have stopped seemed to flow again. The resources that had stopped producing began to produce themselves again. The newborns that should not have been born also began to be born. Everything returned to normal. This situation made the Ling Nation Emperor angry, but he also knew that he was walking on the right path. Under such circumstances, he naturally would not reject this kind of war. For a long time to come, the two islands were like this. You attacked once, then it was scattered. I attacked again, then it was scattered again. Just like that, the cycle repeated itself. It was repeated over and over again. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years. In the end, even the Ling Nation Emperor changed dozens of times, and the entire country was reformed dozens of times. The result of the war between the two islands was finally revealed. The result was obvious. Naturally, the original island, which many cultivators did not attack, had failed. The result of this failure was this. The entire island split again. After tens of thousands of years of evolution, the number of living beings on the island did not increase, but decreased, becoming what it was today. Of course, in contrast to the huge damage that the original island suffered, the clone island also suffered quite a lot. In the end, although it performed better than the original island, it was still in the process of splitting. However, this was obviously meaningless to the clone island. Everything on the clone island, including the island itself, appeared to be a trial for the original island. The goal of their existence was to determine the outcome of the battle with the original island. Since the victor had already been decided, the destruction of the clone island wouldn't affect them at all. In any case, regardless of whether they were still alive at the end of the trial, when the trial was over, they would be completely erased. They would completely disappear from the world, as if they had never existed. Currently, everything on this island was so unfamiliar to Luo Fan. Whether it was the Ling Nation's emperor or the other cultivators he had met before, everything had become something he was no longer familiar with. Even the heavenly gods, divine gods, and the others had changed considerably compared to before the trial, and had also become unfamiliar to him. After all, it was the trial of the saints, and it was both tragic and unparalleled. Compared to the cultivators who had deliberately avoided the trial and stayed out of it, in a war that involved trillions of soldiers, the saints were simply too weak. He also seemed so small. It was impossible for him to completely maintain his sense of self. Only Luo Fan, who was considered the absolute peak existence on this island, could remain eternally unmoved, unaffected by all external forces, and maintain his original beliefs. It's time to go to the four continents. Sensing that the island had returned to the Devil Realm, Luo Fan put the bronze mirror into his universe within sleeve. He slowly stood up. That was what he thought. At this moment, there was nothing special about his body at all. He looked like an ordinary living being. At this moment, the rune structure that had always existed on his body, the rune structure that isolated him from the inside and outside of his body, preventing others from discovering his flawless and unhindered nature, had also completely disappeared. The disappearance of the rune structure was not only because it was connected to the Ling Kingdom, but also because the transition of the Ling Kingdom was closely related to the degree of restraint on the people. Now that the Ling Kingdom had perished, the rune structure would naturally disappear. More importantly, the current Luo Fan no longer needed to rely on the rune structure to completely conceal himself. With just a thought, he could naturally make it so that no one could see him and give birth to the rank 3 pseudo-holy mark in the depths of his soul. During the tens of thousands of years of the trial, the war between the two islands was in full swing, but Luo Fan did not care about it at all. During these years, he had been constantly comprehending the primeval world that had been integrated into the first-level pseudo-sage treasure. Although he did not intend to use this primeval world to become a saint of the Devil Realm, that did not mean that he was dismissive of this primeval world. On the contrary, it was precisely because he had no interest in using this primeval world to become a saint of the Devil Realm that he paid more attention to this primeval world and devoted more attention to it. That was because without the temptation of becoming a saint, he noticed the abnormality of this primeval world and vaguely had some guesses about the nature of this primeval world. In the beginning, this primeval world was exactly the same as when the Devil Realm had just been established, and it was not just the same on the surface. Inside, be it the nomological layer, time, space, matter, energy, or the great Tao that was integrated with the nomological layer, they were all the same. At first glance, such a situation did not seem like much. However, if one thought about it carefully, they would find it terrifying. One had to know that the Devil Realm was a world that could be compared to the Earth universe, and it might even be a world that was jointly established by the 7 sages of the Earth universe. Such a world was already close to a perfect world, and to a certain extent, it could even be regarded as a truly perfect world. How could such a world appear so easily? Moreover, how could it appear in the hands of the Buddhist venerable? Therefore, he could predict that although this world looked the same as when the Devil Realm had just been established, it was definitely not a world of that level. Therefore, he could predict that although this world looked the same as when the Devil Realm had just been established, it was extremely likely that it wasn't even a world. With such an understanding, how could Luo Fan not be curious about this primeval world? How could he let it go? Over the past tens of thousands of years, Luo Fan had comprehended this primordial world. Although he still hadn't found the essence of this world, he had vaguely grasped some tiny traces. He had more understanding of the usage of the various mysteries and the various methods of using power. Once this understanding was revealed, he would be able to guard himself without the rune structure at this moment. Because of this, no one would be able to obtain the grade 3 pseudo-saint mark that was naturally bestowed upon him due to his flawless state. Of course, this was the most direct manifestation. Many other divine abilities, and even the use of the law of cause and effect had more or less improved. However, there were many other improvements. With a slight sigh, he lifted his foot and took a step forward. His figure instantly disappeared from the central lake, which was the half-step pseudo-saint treasure that he had created in the beginning, and headed toward the 4 vast continents in the center. It had been a long time since he had entered the Devil Realm, even if he counted the time that had passed in the Devil Realm itself. However, he was still living and cultivating on a small island at the edge of the Devil Realm. He had always been far away from the center of the Devil Realm. No matter how he looked at it, It didn't make sense. 54 sages fighting. I wonder what it will be like. On the way to the central island, Luo Fan suddenly had some inexplicable expectations in his heart. Given the power of Luo Fan's divine ability, if he had no scruples, it wouldn't take much time to reach the central island. It would only take him a few days at most. However, it was obvious. Although Luo Fan was already a rank 3 pseudo-saint, he could already be regarded as an invincible powerhouse on the island he had first entered. However, in the entire demon realm, it was still not enough. If he wanted to be truly fearless, he would have to be extremely powerful. He was still far from being able to do so. The demon world was too vast, and there were too many experts in it. During the journey, Luo Fan had an unprecedented feeling that the island he had stayed on for a long time was at the edge of the wilderness of the devil realm. This was because the more he moved forward, the more he found that there were many powerful auras blocking his way. Among these auras, the weakest ones might only be at the quasi-sage level, but the stronger ones were at the level 7 or level 8 pseudo-saints. Along the way, Luo Fan even felt the faint aura of a level 9 pseudo-sage cultivator. These auras weren't actually targeting Luo Fan, but they didn't have any hostility towards Luo Fan. However, they occupied a large area. Some of them were on an island, some were on a sea, and some even opened up a vast void in the void. The existence of so many auras made it impossible for Luo Fan to unleash his speed to the fullest. The reason for that was because if he did that, it would be a provocation to them, a disrespect to them. If Luo Fan didn't want to complicate things, he would have to slow down and show them some respect. However, although Luo Fan had no choice but to slow down because of these auras, he didn't feel too upset. Instead, he was enjoying it. He would pass through most of the territories with powerful auras, but he would stop for a while when there were some auras that he was interested in. He would stay for a few days or a few months to observe the various landscapes and customs in the territory with the auras. If he encountered the owner of a friendly aura, he would even visit them as a guest for a period of time and interact with them. Although this experience didn't benefit Luo Fan much, and he didn't comprehend any incredible mysteries or improve his cultivation, it broadened his horizons and allowed him to have a deeper understanding of the demon realm. He also gained some understanding of the rules of the entire demon realm. Luo Fan already knew some of these rules from Xianwen, the sect master of the Azure Temple. However, Xianwen was only a pseudo-saint back then. Although he wasn't at the bottom of the demon realm, his level wasn't high either, and his knowledge was limited. How could he compare to the pseudo-saint existences that Luo Fan visited? On this day, Luo Fan arrived at an empty sea. His heart suddenly skipped a beat as he sensed an inexplicable familiar aura. It's actually here. He smiled faintly. At this moment, the aura that he sensed suddenly skyrocketed by dozens of times. The aura, which was originally faintly diffusing and faintly indicating the scope of its influence, suddenly condensed into a substance. It directly condensed into a substance in the area of thousands of miles around Luo Fan's body, forming a strange world, a world whose color and shape couldn't be described with words. Luo Fan was extremely familiar with this world. It was the strange world that he had entered when he participated in the Buddhist Supreme's test. Looks like I'm in luck today. You actually appeared in front of me at this time. A voice filled with endless anger rang in Luo Fan's ears. Luo Fan's memory was amazing. He knew who the voice belonged to as soon as he heard it. Coupled with the world that was formed by the aura in front of him, how could he not know who it was? That was obviously the pseudo-saint level 6 that he had encountered when he participated in the Buddhist Supreme's test and had several conflicts with. So it's you, fellow Taoist. What a coincidence. In the past, Luo Fan might have paid some attention to such an existence. However, not only had he become a pseudo-saint level 3 now, but he had also comprehended the second level of the law of karma. His strength was much stronger than before, so why would he still care about this person? What a coincidence. A figure gradually condensed in front of Luo Fan. It was indeed the pseudo-saint level 6. However, compared to before, His expression was unsightly at this moment. He seemed extremely gloomy and cold, and there was even an indescribable ferocity faintly mixed within. He seemed as if he wished for nothing more than to immediately pounce on Luo Fan and tear him to shreds and swallow him. Chapter 13:17. The level 6 pseudo-sage sneered and said, "I hope you can maintain this good attitude later." As he spoke, he raised his hand and grabbed at Li Hao. With this grab, it was as if the entire universe had been sucked into his hand. In a trance, Luo Fan seemed to have been pulled into an incomparably strange space-time. There was even a vague state of chaos that was about to assimilate everything and destroy everything. Compared to what he had encountered in the Buddhist Supreme's test, this level 6 pseudo-sage was more than 10,000 times stronger. As soon as he attacked, it was a terrifying technique that could destroy heaven and earth and restore the universe to silence. Facing such a technique, Luo Fan's expression did not change, but there was a flash of realization in his eyes. This was the true strength of a level 6 pseudo-sage. In the Buddhist Supreme's test, most of his strength was restricted, and he could only use less than a 10,000th of his strength. However, although Luo Fan was a little wary of such a level 6 pseudo-sage, he was not afraid of him. Even if it was a little troublesome to deal with him, it was not impossible. With a thought, his figure flashed, and a terrifying wave was emitted from his body, rushing out. In an instant, the feeling that he was about to fall into an extremely strange space-time caused by the level 6 pseudo-sage grab, and the feeling of chaos that was about to descend and destroy everything was completely broken. At this moment, the grab of the level 6 pseudo-sage had become so normal. At most, it was just a little stronger, and the surrounding space-time was shattered. It formed some space-time fog around the grab. However, such a grab was nothing to Luo Fan. He smiled slightly, raised his hand, and pointed at the level 6 pseudo-sage's finger. In an instant, a powerful force was born out of thin air, and it collided with the level 6 pseudo-sage's hand. The nature of the wave was different from the one emitted by Luo Fan's body, but it was equally terrifying. It swept out in all directions, directly stirring the surrounding time and space into pieces. It took a while for it to recover. However, that was all there was to it. With this move, neither Luo Fan nor the level 6 pseudo-sacred sage were injured. Obviously, Luo Fan pointed. However, he did not gain the upper hand. Seeing this, the level 6 pseudo-sage began to panic. His expression changed drastically. If Luo Fan was a 6th grade pseudo-martial sage, he would naturally be able to accept such an outcome. He wasn't so arrogant as to think that he could kill someone who was at the same level as him. However, the person before him was only a level 3 pseudo-saint. Normally speaking, he could crush countless of such existences with a single finger. But now, he had actually let it go. The attack that he had sent out in anger was actually so easily dealt with by the other party. How could he not be shocked? "What treasure did you use?" he asked instinctively. However, after he asked this question, he knew that he had asked a silly question. No matter what the reason was, he wanted to destroy the other party's soul. So why would the other party tell him his secret? After understanding this, he didn't wait for Luo Fan's answer. With a thought, a tortoise shell appeared above his head and floated 3 feet above his head. An inexplicable light was emitted from the tortoise shell, causing the space-time within a radius of 100 million miles to change completely. A vast and boundless world replaced the original sea area. So it's a tortoise shell. It seems that there's a reason why he obtained a tortoise shell as the proof of the test. Luo Fan was slightly shocked when he saw this. There was no doubt that this tortoise shell was a 6th grade pseudo-sacred treasure. Although the aura exuded from it was extremely obscure, its essence was so high and strong that one could tell with a slight sense. No matter what treasure you have, you must die today, the level 6 pseudo-sacred sage said angrily. As he spoke, the tortoise shell above his head suddenly shook, and a ray of light rushed out from it, transcending space-time. It seemed to have arrived above Luo Fan's head the moment it was born, and it shrouded Luo Fan fiercely. In this light, Luo Fan felt an incomparably pure destruction. It was as if this light was the essence of pure destruction abstracted from it. Anything without substance, even if it was a world, even if it was space-time, even if it was a nomological law, would be completely destroyed by this light. In the face of such a terrifying light, Luo Fan naturally couldn't just stand there and wait for the light to come up. With a thought, a world instantly enveloped the light. Then, as the world trembled slightly, the light was transferred directly into the state of chaos, directly triggering a tremor in the state of chaos. This tremor caused the entire demon realm, the entire Earth, the universe, and even the billions of worlds in between to experience an unknown number of trillions of changes at the same time. In the end, it condensed in one place, forming a kind of obliterating power that suddenly condensed toward Luo Fan and the level 6 pseudo-sage. This obliterating power targeted the memory and all the consequences caused by the light. This included the world that was born because of the light, the time and space that were destroyed because of the light, and the nomological laws that were shattered because of the light. All of these were related to the light. Luo Fan had already expected this. With a move of his heart, he directly displayed the second level of the law of causality. In an instant, countless trillions of subtle changes appeared in the demon domain. Finally, they gathered together and resisted the impact of the obliterating power on his memory, preserving his memory of the light. Luo Fan could predict this and had long prepared to resist, but the level 6 pseudo-sacred sage couldn't do this. At this moment, he had no time to react at all and was already swept by the light. Although he used a method to resist in an instant, in the end, he only managed to preserve a little bit of his memory. His eyes suddenly became a little blank, and he couldn't remember what had just happened. Seeing such a good opportunity in front of him, how could Luo Fan let it go? He took a step forward. He had already arrived in front of the level 6 pseudo-sage, and with a slap, he sent the level 6 pseudo-sage directly through the layers of space-time barriers and all kinds of strange barriers, sending the level 6 pseudo-sage into the chaotic state. Although the level 6 pseudo-sacred sage was a little blank, he hadn't completely turned into a block of wood after all. At first, he was a little unable to react, and was sent to the barrier outside the gap between the state of chaos and the world by Luo Fan. However, just as he was about to crash into the barrier, the moment he broke through the barriers and entered the state of chaos, he finally reacted. He roared in shock and anger, and the turtle shell on his head shook slightly. It produced a powerful and unparalleled suppression force. In an instant, his body was suppressed in front of the barrier. Finally, at the last moment, he avoided the fate of being thrown into the state of chaos. At this moment, he broke out in a cold sweat. He secretly cursed the person in front of him for being extremely sinister. What kind of existence was the state of chaos? It was a place where only the supreme sages could come and go freely. Even though he had already set foot on the 6th step below the sages and had become a level 6 pseudo-sacred sage, he was still extremely fragile in front of this state of chaos. Once he was thrown into it, he wouldn't even have the slightest ability to resist. All traces of him in all space-time would be instantly erased by the state of chaos, so that there would be no trace of his existence in the countless worlds and the memories of countless living beings. As he broke out in a cold sweat, he became even more furious and cursed. "How dare you trick me, Dai?" Just as he was cursing, the turtle shell on his head suddenly emitted a dazzling light and pounced towards Luo Fan. On the surface, it looked somewhat similar to the light from before, but in essence it was completely different. The light from before was the abstract essence of destruction, but the light now seemed to be an abstraction of the essence. In other words, the light from before was the purest kind of destruction, the kind of destruction that would completely destroy anything in front of it. But now, this light was a pure grab that could grab everything and send everything to wherever it wanted. All space, even if it was a world, even if it was a formless and intangible abstract existence, would be treated equally in front of this abstract grab. There was no difference at all. Luo Fan was feeling a little sorry for the level 6 pseudo-sacred sage for being able to react so quickly. Suddenly, he noticed that the level 6 pseudo-sacred sage was emitting such a light. He was shocked. He's trying to imitate me and send me into the state of chaos. It's not that easy. With a thought, another world instantly enveloped the light that was trying to capture the essence. The essence of the light itself had astonishing grasping abilities. Even the world was within its grasp. The moment the world enveloped the light, it felt a completely different obstruction compared to when it had enveloped the previous light. It was as if a strange power was fighting with it for control of the world. However, the essence of grabbing was only grabbing after all. It was just like how a person could grab an item, but if there was another person fighting with him for it, then the speed at which he wanted to grab that item would definitely be many times slower than before. It was even extremely likely that he wouldn't be able to grab it in the end. This was the current situation. Although the light that had been abstracted from the essence itself possessed astonishing and terrifying might, it would take some time to truly grasp this world. For Luo Fan, this period of time was enough for him to send this world into the state of chaos. It just so happened that this was the barrier before entering the state of chaos. Of course, it was the barrier between heaven and earth, not the final barrier between heaven and earth and the state of chaos. After all, that gap did not exist for a level 6 pseudo-sacred sage. This saved Luo Fan a lot of effort, and he easily sent that world into the state of chaos. That world was just a minor chiliocosm that Luo Fan had casually created. It could even be considered as a minor chiliocosm. One could imagine how fragile it was. The result of such a world being sent into the state of chaos was very obvious. Almost at the same time it was sent into the state of chaos, the world was directly annihilated. Although the annihilation of the world could not destroy the essence of the light that grabbed essence, it directly exposed that light to the state of chaos. In an instant, the light was completely destroyed by the state of chaos. At the same time, a strong and strange wave broke out from it, immersing into heaven and earth, causing the earth, the universe, the demon realm, and countless worlds in between to erupt with countless subtle changes at the same time. In the end, it produced a kind of obliterating power that concentrated on Luo Fan and the level 6 pseudo-sacred sage. This time, the level 6 pseudo-sacred sage was prepared. In an instant, he used an extremely special method. As the power in his body vibrated, an unparalleled impact kept surging in his body. It kept fluctuating. Unexpectedly, that memory-obliterating power was completely blocked, and his memory of the golden light was preserved. However, at this moment, he suddenly realized. A big hand slapped toward him. This huge hand contained boundless and terrifying power. In an instant, it even made him feel that a vast chiliocosm would be completely destroyed by this hand. This power directly slapped his body, causing his whole body to tremble violently. In an instant, half of his body completely exploded. It turned into countless tiny particles. However, this was still secondary. Even if half of his body exploded to such an extent, for him, he could recover with just a thought. What made him even more panicked was that during the process of using the tortoise shell to grab the light, the tortoise shell's suppressive power suddenly weakened a lot. Under this power, it could no longer hold his body in place, causing his body to crash uncontrollably toward the barrier of chaos behind him. From the looks of it, he was about to break through the barrier in an instant and be directly sent into the state of chaos. How could he not panic when he felt this? One had to know that this was the state of chaos. Although he rarely sensed the primal chaos state when he was cultivating, he had still sensed it before. He was well aware of the terrifying might of the primal chaos state. If he was sent into the primal chaos state, the time he could endure would definitely not be longer than the time he was sent into the primal chaos state, seeing that he was about to be sent into it uncontrollably. How could he not panic? Freeze, freeze for me. He roared rapidly. At this moment, the tortoise shell above his head emitted an abstract light that represented the suppressive essence and enveloped his body, fixing his body firmly in the void. Unfortunately, this light still needed time to erupt. It also needed some time to grow from nothing to a strength that was strong enough to fix him in place. During this period of time, it was already enough for that terrifying power to push him into the state of chaos. Save me. The sage-level, 6th-level pseudo-sage suddenly shouted hysterically. Although this voice was only 2 words, it seemed to not need time to pass. In an instant, it spread far and wide, allowing Luo Fan to hear the content of the words clearly. At this moment, a leisurely sigh suddenly entered Luo Fan's ears. Then, the barrier leading to the state of chaos suddenly flashed with golden light. It was as if the originally fragile piece of paper had suddenly turned into a wall made of steel. It became extremely strong and exuded an eternal charm. At this moment, the body of the sage-level, 6th-level pseudo-sage directly collided with the barrier. Following that, his entire body exploded, as if he had been completely annihilated. However, he was unable to withstand the terrifying force of the collision. However, at the last moment, the sage-level 6th-level pseudo-sage showed a relieved smile on his face. Then, after he exploded, the tortoise shell rotated slightly and covered him, collecting the many tiny particles scattered by the explosion into the tortoise shell. Then, the tortoise shell trembled slightly and disappeared in front of the barrier, leading to the state of chaos. When it reappeared, it was already in the sea region where Luo Fan encountered the sage-level 6th-level pseudo-sage. Luo Fan's heart skipped a beat, and he sighed. He knew that he could not deal with the sage-level 6th-level pseudo-sage in the end. He took a step forward, passed through the layers of obstacles, and arrived in the same sea region. At this moment, there was already an additional middle-aged man with a benevolent expression. This person was also a sage-level 6th-level pseudo-sage. However, compared to the previous sage-level 6th-level pseudo-sage, he had a trace of a strange charm, as if he had inexplicably transcended. At this moment, the tortoise shell that escaped from the barrier shook slightly and collapsed. Countless tiny particles poured out of the tortoise shell and continued to pile up in the void. After a while, the particles piled up and formed the appearance of a man. It was the sage-level 6th-level pseudo-sage. The sage-level 6th-level pseudo-sage bowed to the benevolent middle-aged man and said, "Thank you, Taoist Beishur, for saving my life." Judging from his words, the sage-level 6th-level pseudo-sage from before was this sage-level 6th-level pseudo-sage called Beishur. The middle-aged man smiled and said, "Taoist Black Turtle, there's no need to be so polite. We've been friends for hundreds of millions of years. How can I watch you die without saving you?" Hearing this, Luo Fan finally knew that the sage-level 6th-level pseudo-sage who had fought against him so many times was actually called Black Turtle. "So your name is Black Turtle. We've met so many times, but I only know your name today. It's really rude of me," Luo Fan said with a smile. Looking at him, it was as if the battle between him and the Black Turtle that had almost killed each other previously didn't happen at all. Such a strange behavior made the sage-level 6th-level pseudo-sage called Black Turtle fall into a trance. He felt that the situation in front of him was very strange. Chapter 13:18. Fellow Taoist, you must be the person that Taoist Black Turtle mentioned, the one who had a misunderstanding and conflict with him during the Buddha's inheritance test, right? The one who answered Luo Fan was not the Black Turtle, but another middle-aged, level 6 false sage. He was also a powerful existence that the Black Turtle called Beishur. Although this person's cultivation seemed to be similar to the Black Turtle's, judging from his performance, he seemed to be much stronger than the Black Turtle. At least, this could be seen from the process of the Black Turtle not being able to resist Luo Fan, pushing him into the state of chaos. But he was able to reinforce the barrier at the last moment to rescue the Black Turtle. However, judging from his words at this time, he did not seem to have much hostility towards Luo Fan. "Yes, I am Luo Fan. How should I address you, fellow Taoist?" Luo Fan said with a smile. Although the Black Turtle called him Taoist Bei-Shi, it was not known if the word Bei-Shi was his full name. Relatively speaking, Luo Fan naturally treated him as if he did not know him. If he wanted to communicate, of course, he had to first announce his name. I am Taoist Bei-Shi. Nice to meet you, fellow Taoist Luo Fan. The middle-aged man chuckled and said, So it's Taoist Bei-Shi. Nice to meet you. Luo Fan said with a smile. The two actually began to exchange greetings here, completely unable to tell that they were in a state of hostility before. It was as if they were old friends at first sight. After a while, Taoist Bei-Shi said to Luo Fan, Taoist Luo Fan and Taoist Black Turtle had some misunderstandings in the past, but now that the test is over, you and I are both cultivators. It is better to squash enmity than keep it alive. Why don't we just forget about it? It was just a misunderstanding. I never took it to heart. As long as Taoist Black Turtle is willing, we can forget about it at any time. What do you think, Taoist Black Turtle? Luo Fan just smiled and said. When the Black Turtle saw the two of them chatting enthusiastically, he was already extremely angry. At this time, hearing this, how could he bear it, and shouted angrily, Forget about it! Do you know how long I planned for that test? That was 10 trillion years. 10 trillion years. Such a long-term plan has been destroyed by you, and now you want to let it go just like that. His anger was so strong that it was unimaginable. It directly materialized and rushed out from his body, forming a raging fire that burned the surrounding void until it was slightly distorted and fluctuated violently. It was as if even the space-time of the demon realm could not withstand his anger. That was normal. A normal person would be enraged when their plan of several years was broken. Some people with weak psychological endurance would even jump off a building to commit suicide. The plan that the Black Turtle had been planning for 1 trillion years had been destroyed by Luo Fan. Even if he was a 6th-level pseudo-sage, even if his Taoist heart was tough and unshakable, he could not let it go so easily. Fellow Taoist Black Turtle. Taoist Bei-Shi looked at the Black Turtle's appearance. He furrowed his brows and said indifferently. These words were like a bucket of cold water being poured over the Black Turtle's head. It completely extinguished the Black Turtle's anger, causing him to suddenly regain his calmness. He was very clear that the person in front of him seemed to be in the same realm as him, but he was a disciple of a sage. The power of his magical power was many times stronger than his. If he had not given him pointers in his early years, before he became a disciple of sage, he had given him some kindness. How would the Black Turtle have taken a liking to him and become friends with him? If he really disobeyed his thoughts, what awaited him, even if it was not some bad fate such as death, there would not be any good consequences. However, although he had already thought of the special identity of Taoist Bei-Shi, he did not dare to be presumptuous, but he could not swallow his anger towards Luo Fan for a while, so he could only remain silent. Taoist Bei-Shi looked at the Black Turtle's appearance and finally remembered the kindness he had shown him. He said, Fellow Taoist Black Turtle, although you have been planning for so many years, are you confident that even without Luo Fan, you can really pass the test of the Buddha and obtain the inheritance of the Buddha? When the Black Turtle heard this, his expression changed, and he instinctively wanted to refute. After all, this was a plan that he had been planning for 1 trillion years. How could he admit defeat so easily? However, before he could refute, he thought of the process of the 3 tests that the Buddha had prepared for him and his performance in the process. In the end, he could not be thick-skinned and ignore the facts. In desperation, he could only sigh and said, It really can't be done. It's just that, although I can't complete the test in the end, if this person didn't cause trouble at the side, I would definitely be able to get more benefits from it. How would it be like now, where I got nothing, and even the last 4 worlds that I refined were taken back? Taoist Bei-Shi shook his head and said, Fellow Taoist Black Turtle, you are wrong. These words stunned the Black Turtle, and he asked, Fellow Taoist Bei-Shi, why do you say so? I've been wanting to warn you about this for a long time. Although the inheritance of the Buddha is extremely precious and is even said to be the opportunity to become a sage, even the Buddha was unable to use it to become a sage. One can imagine how small the chance for it to make someone a sage is. How could such a small chance be worth spending billions of years pursuing? Originally, you spent billions of years planning this, which is already neglecting the essentials. If you had completely focused on cultivation during these billions of years, how could you still be a level 6 pseudo-sage? Maybe you would have become a level 7, level 8, or even a level 9 pseudo-sage. Isn't it better this way? You failed the test, so you don't have to focus on preparing for the test anymore. Isn't that a good thing? Taoist Beisher said. Luo Fan had been listening to the conversation between the two. At first, he just listened with a smile and did not care about the content of their conversation. But when Taoist Beisher said this, his heart skipped a beat. This person's identity is probably not simple. Perhaps he is a disciple of a sage, or at least a level 9 pseudo-sage's disciple. Otherwise, he would not look down on the Buddha's inheritance, nor would he make the black turtle believe that he did not want the inheritance of the Buddha and tell him this secret. Hearing Taoist Beisher's words, the expression on the black turtle's face kept changing. Sometimes he was angry, sometimes he was relieved, sometimes he became ferocious again, and then he became calm again. There were all kinds of changes, almost like a chameleon. After a while, the black turtle finally let out a long sigh, and his expression became one of realization. In his eyes, there was a light as if he had seen through everything. Then, the aura on his body suddenly skyrocketed uncontrollably, instantly breaking through his original level and stepping into a brand new level that Luo Fan could also feel. The level of a level 7 pseudo-sage. It was because of what Taoist Beisher said. He directly broke through the shackles of his original cultivation realm, breaking through the bottleneck between level 6 pseudo-sage and level 7 pseudo-sage, stepping into the level 7 pseudo-sage realm. He stepped into the 7th step below sage. He was only 2 steps away from becoming a saint, just one breakthrough. The aura of a level 7 pseudo-sage was more than 1,000 times stronger than a level 6 pseudo-sage. In the blink of an eye, this aura opened up a vast and boundless space. This space, the sky was round and the earth was round, but the terrain was a world that Luo Fan was completely unfamiliar with. In it, there were hundreds of millions of creatures fighting. These creatures all had great power and contained a high realm. In their fight, there were hundreds of millions of kinds of mysteries of the great Tao, and there were even some chaotic supreme principles contained in it. Obviously, this world was the world of the black turtle's own mind, and the living beings in that world were the many mysteries that the black turtle had mastered. Many wonderful principles. All these changes only appeared for a few breaths, and then completely disappeared, completely restrained. At this time, the black turtle had turned into a very ordinary middle-aged man. His image was quite different from before. It seemed that even his mentality was much younger. Taoist Beisher watched the whole process of the black turtle's breakthrough. There was only a gratified smile on his face. Obviously, the black turtle's breakthrough seemed to be painstakingly planned. At this time, Luo Fan did not panic. Although the black turtle had made a breakthrough, he still had the confidence to escape from him. However, he was still confident that he could escape from him. In fact, if he was not careful, he was even confident that he could send him into the primal chaos state and let the primal chaos state help him destroy his opponent. The black turtle came back to his senses and first bowed to Taoist Beisher, saying, "Thank you for your advice. If it weren't for you, I don't know how many billions of years it would take for me to realize my mistake and to be able to see through the mystery of the 7th step. You're too polite. If it weren't for you, I would have been dead for trillions of years. What's a little bit of repayment now?" Taoist Beisher smiled. "I'm ashamed. I was just casually taking action at that time, and my contribution was so limited. But now, for countless billions of years, I have been basking in your glory. I have been saved by you countless times. If you say that again, I don't dare to be friends with you anymore." The black turtle sighed. Taoist Beisher naturally tried to persuade him, saying that the other party's little effort changed his fate, and that he still had to thank him today. After a round of pleasantly thanking one another, both of them were very satisfied. Then, They focused their attention on Luo Fan. I'm surprised that you didn't run away. The black turtle smiled. At this time, he no longer showed any anger or hatred. Although the way he looked at Luo Fan was not intimate, it was not cold either. Why should I run? Luo Fan smiled. Why should I run? Is there a need to say it? Now that I have a breakthrough in my cultivation, killing you is as easy as flipping my hand. Aren't you afraid that I will kill you? The level 7 pseudodivine turtle said. Why kill me? I don't think you have a reason to kill me. Also, I don't think you can kill me. Luo Fan's tone was calm, but there was an indescribable confidence in his words, as if everything was under his control. Ha ha ha. The black turtle suddenly burst into laughter. After a while, he said, I hated you no matter how I looked at you before, but now I find that you are quite interesting. All right, my name is Taoist Black Turtle. Today, let us put all our hatred behind us. Greetings, Taoist Black Turtle. Luo Fan chuckled and formally greeted Taoist Black Turtle, and Taoist Black Turtle solemnly returned the greeting. After this, the two of them could be considered to have completely swept away all the hatred in the past, and from then on returned to zero. Good. Since the two of you have now put aside all enmity, why don't we go into the cave residence and talk about the Tao? Taoist Bay sure laughed happily. That's how it should be. My cave residence is nearby. I wonder if Taoist Luo Fan would do me the honor? Taoist Black Turtle also smiled and invited. When Luo Fan heard this, a thought flashed through his mind, and he smiled. I wouldn't dare to ask for it. Just now, they were about to fight to the death, and now entering the other party's cave residence seemed to be extremely dangerous, but Luo Fan thought about it. He knew that there would not be much danger in it at all. At the very least, he had enough escape routes. Even if the cave residence was special and had some incredible ability, he could still use the divine court heavenly cauldron, a level 9 pseudo-sage treasure, to break through everything and escape. There would be no danger to his life at all. In that case, there was an opportunity to communicate with this level 7 pseudo-sage existence on equal footing, so why not? The reason why Luo Fan was confident that he could break through everything with the Divine Court Heavenly Cauldron was very simple. The Divine Court Heavenly Cauldron was a level 9 pseudo-sage treasure, although it was not a real level 9 pseudo-sage treasure refined with enough materials. It was still a level 9 pseudo-sage treasure after all. As Luo Fan's cultivation realm continued to improve, as he approached the level 9 pseudo-sage level, the power he could exert when he used this magic treasure also became stronger and stronger. Now that he had become a level 3 pseudo-saint, he could already exert 1% of the power of this magic tool. Although it was only 1% of the power, it was definitely not a problem to completely destroy a level 8 pseudo-saint. To be able to unleash such power, the traps laid down by level 7 and level 6 pseudo-sages must be extremely powerful. Naturally, there was no danger to him. Seeing Luo Fan nod in agreement, both Taoist Divine Turtle and Taoist Hermit showed a cheerful smile on their faces. They looked at each other and saw a look of appreciation in each other's eyes. Obviously, he admired Luo Fan for actually daring to agree to go to Taoist Mysterious Turtle's cave abode without any discount, and did not even propose to open a cave abode here. Such boldness, such confidence. However, it wasn't something an ordinary cultivator could possess. Under this admiration, the two of them even had the thought of truly befriending Luo Fan at the same time. After confirming, the three of them turned into 3 beams of light and shot toward the area where Taoist Divine Turtle's aura was the strongest. The speed of the 3 of them was extremely astonishing. Almost in the blink of an eye, they had crossed a distance of hundreds of millions of miles and appeared on a small island. Of course, although this island was small, it was only small when compared to the scale of the demonic realm. In terms of area, the area of this island was even larger than the area of dozens of Earths. And on this island, there were famous mountains and scenic spots everywhere, and everywhere there was a dazzling glow. There were all kinds of exotic flowers and plants, dense ancient trees, strange rocks, and strange mountains. Everything that one could imagine was here. With a glance, Luo Fan found that there were many cultivators on this island. Among them, there were more than 100 pseudo-saint-level cultivators. Although these pseudo-saint-level cultivators were generally only level 1 or level 2 pseudo-saint level, and those who were level 3 and above were only in the single digits. Compared to the many islands that Luo Fan had been to before, they were many times stronger. And in addition to the many pseudo-saint-level cultivators, there were also countless pseudo-saint-level and below. However, they only lived around the pseudo-saint-level cultivators, as if they were their disciples. These are your disciples, right? Luo Fan could not help but exclaim when he sensed the situation on this island. I'm sorry. I've been working for trillions of years to build up this little foundation. I'm a little ashamed, Taoist mysterious turtle said. As they spoke, the three of them had already landed in a group of cave residences in the center of the island. This was the location with the best cultivation environment on the entire island. Even compared to the center of the island where the Ling Kingdom was located, the cultivation environment here was hundreds of times better. This was the opposite of the size of the other two islands, showing that this island was special and mysterious. And in this group of cave residences, the aura of pseudo-saint-level cultivators rose into the sky. This was the place with the highest concentration of pseudo-saint-level cultivators on the entire island. The place where Luo Fan and the others landed was in front of the largest cave residence in this group of cave residences. Here, multicolored light shone everywhere, strange trees were everywhere, and wisps of chaotic yuan qi were mixed in with the rich, innate yuan qi, making this place look like a fairyland. It's really a good place, Luo Fan exclaimed. Sorry for the inconvenience. Taoist mysterious turtle chuckled. Such a good place is rare. Even my cave residence pales in comparison. Taoist sad world explained with a smile. I can see that. However, to be able to provide so many cultivators with cultivation resources on this small island, fellow Taoist must have expended a lot of effort. I wonder how it was achieved? Luo Fan first exclaimed in admiration, and then asked his own doubts. Although the area of this island was larger than the area of dozens of Earths put together, and it would not be a problem for a population of several trillion people to survive, such an island could only support 2 or 3 pseudo-saint-level cultivators at most. Even if the pseudo-saint-level cultivator was a big spender of cultivation resources, the number would be even lower. But now, such an island could support hundreds of pseudo-saint-level cultivators, and an even greater number of quasi-saint-level cultivators. This was an unimaginable support capacity. Luo Fan would not believe that there was nothing mysterious about it. Chapter 1319. After feeling proud of himself, he did not bother to change the topic, but directly began to explain to Luo Fan. This island looks like an ordinary island, but in fact, it has been refined into a special magic weapon by me. Although its level is not high, only a level 3 pseudo-sage treasure, it has a unique use. It can create and destroy worlds at any time, and obtain all resources that cannot be obtained normally. It is precisely because of this that it can support the cultivation of so many cultivators. When Luo Fan heard this, he could not help but be slightly surprised. This island was actually a level 3 pseudo-sage treasure. This was something he had not sensed before. After Taoist mysterious turtle said this, Luo Fan carefully comprehended it. Only then did he discover a trace of extremely obscure traces, faintly feeling that this island might really be a powerful magic weapon. Fellow Taoist magical power is brilliant. I admire you. He could only praise like this. This kind of method of refining magic weapons was indeed worthy of admiration. This kind of magic weapon was completely integrated into heaven and earth, completely integrated into the laws of the demonic realm, and even integrated with the great Tao of this world, was something he had never seen before. The degree of subtlety was amazing, and Luo Fan could not help but admire it. After talking for a while, the three of them naturally entered the cave abode. In the cave abode, there were all kinds of strange wonders and all kinds of mysterious artifacts, which only made Luo Fan feel that it was an eye-opener. Next, Luo Fan stayed in this cave abode of Taoist mysterious turtle for 3 years. During these 3 years, he, Taoist mysterious turtle, and Taoist Beishur had a discussion about the Tao. They chatted about the world, and occasionally, from time to time, he would give a sermon on this island, preaching the wonderful method of his cultivation to the many cultivators on this island, and explaining the mystery of the great Tao of heaven and earth to these many cultivators. In this way, a full 3 years had passed. Whether it was Luo Fan, Taoist Beishur, who was a disciple of the sage, or Taoist mysterious turtle who had just broken through to the level 7 pseudo-sage, all felt that they had gained a lot. All 3 of them were quite satisfied with the decision to turn enemies into friends. They felt that this was quite the right thing to do. During the exchange, Luo Fan also learned that this Taoist Beishur was the grand disciple of one of the 54 sages of the demonic realm called the Heaven Beginning Sage. That was to say, his master, the disciple of the Heaven Beginning Sage, a disciple of a sage of the Heaven Beginning Sage, although he was not a real disciple of a sage. However, such an identity was extremely valuable in the demon world. He was definitely not a sect master of an ordinary sect. Not even the sect master could compare. In fact, even those grade 9 pseudo-sacred sages would have to give him some face when facing him and would not dare to be too impudent. As the grand disciple of the Heaven's Beginning Saint, Taoist Beishur's knowledge was naturally extremely vast. Even Luo Fan's knowledge in some aspects was somewhat inferior to his. Through these 3 years, Luo Fan had obtained the greatest benefits from him. As the grand disciple of the Heaven Beginning Sage, Taoist Beishur was naturally extremely knowledgeable. Even Luo Fan was not as knowledgeable as him in some aspects. Through these 3 years, he had gained the most from Taoist Beishur. However, compared to Taoist Beishur, he had cultivated for a very long time, even more than 1 trillion years. Such a long time had allowed him to accumulate unimaginable experience, allowing him to obtain infinite knowledge. During the exchange, although there was no overly mysterious or incredible method revealed, but the wisdom that was accumulated over a long period of time revealed in a few words also made both Luo Fan and Taoist Beishur feel as if their horizons had been broadened. On this day, Taoist Beishur suddenly said to Luo Fan, "In another 10 years, it will be the Chun Palace's treasure meet that is held once every 100,000 years. I wonder if you're interested in going there? Chun Palace Treasure Conference? What kind of conference is that?" Luo Fan could not help but be curious when he heard this completely unfamiliar name. When Taoist Divine Turtle heard this, a look of realization appeared on his face, as if he should have known it long ago, but only remembered it now after being reminded by Taoist Beishur. So there are only 10 years left. Fellow Taoists may not know, but the Chun Palace Treasure Discussion is the grandest exchange meeting in the Chunxi territory. It is held once every 100,000 years, and each meeting lasts for 10 years. The location of the event was an island that was more than 10 trillion kilometers away from where they were right now. If I calculate the time, there really isn't even 10 years until the next treasure discussion. This sea was already out of the war-torn Lost Sea. More specifically, it had passed through more than a dozen sea areas. This sea area was called the Chun Sea area. It was vast and boundless, and the islands within it were almost endless. At least, for Luo Fan, he had yet to specifically count how many islands there were in this sea area. I wonder what precious items there are in the treasure conference. Luo Fan asked. In the treasure conference, there are supernatural powers, techniques, magic treasures, pills, worlds, universes, and so on. Almost everything related to cultivation will be there. It may not be of much use to existences like you and me, but it can broaden our horizons, so it is a good place to go. At this time, the person who explained to Luo Fan was not Taoist Mysterious Turtle, but Taoist Beishur. Luo Fan heard this and nodded, but in his heart, he had the idea of going to the treasure conference to take a look. Although it was indeed, as Taoist Beishur had said, it was very unlikely that the divine abilities, techniques, magic treasures, pills, worlds, and universes in the treasure discussion would have anything that could move his heart. But if it was truly all-encompassing, then perhaps there would be items that could touch his heart and allow him to obtain some revelations. Moreover, even if there were none, through seeing the many treasures in the treasure conference, he would be able to understand the cultivation world of the demonic realm better. Why not? After thinking this through, Luo Fan smiled and said, I see. Then let's go to Chun Palace Island. Hearing Luo Fan's words, Taoist Mysterious Turtle and Taoist Bay sure both smiled and nodded. They did not have any special plans. It was just that after a few years of interaction, they felt that the person before them was worth befriending, so they decided to share the most special items in this sea area with him. Even if Luo Fan did not agree and did not want to go, they would not try to persuade him. And if Luo Fan wanted to go, it would not be any trouble for them. Next, thus, they put aside the matter of the Chun Palace treasure discussion and continued to discuss the Tao. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. One day after 10 years, Taoist Mysterious Turtle pinched his fingers and said, The treasure conference in Chun Palace is starting today. Why don't we go now? That's right. Luo Fan laughed when he heard this. None of them were ordinary cultivators. Since they had decided, they naturally would not delay any longer. They got up and left the cave residence. The matter of the treasure conference in Chun Palace. It was not a secret in the Chinsi area. Almost all cultivators knew about the treasure conference. The cultivators who cultivated on this island under Taoist Mysterious Turtle's command were no exception. When the three of them came out, the island was already very lively. It turned out that there were many cultivators quietly cultivating in various places. They had all left their places of cultivation, or invited friends and relatives, or visited everywhere. It was obvious that they were planning to go there. Luo Fan and the others did not hide their figures. Soon, those cultivators soon discovered the three of them. In the past few years, Luo Fan and the others would give lectures from time to time. For the cultivators on the island, it was a great kindness. The cultivators on the island had long since treated them as elders and revered them. Even for those cultivators whose cultivation was higher than Luo Fan's, after listening to his lectures a few times, the arrogance that originally existed was completely dispelled. They no longer looked down on them. Now that they saw Luo Fan and the others coming out of the cave residence together, they naturally did not dare to be negligent. Like rain, they hurried to this position to pay their respects. Taoist Mysterious Turtle looked at them and chuckled. We're going to the treasure conference to take a look. Do as you please. Immediately, there were naturally many cultivators who wanted to travel with them so that they could serve them along the way. To such cultivators, Taoist Mysterious Turtle only politely declined, saying that he wanted some peace and quiet and did not want to be disturbed by too many people along the way. This was, of course, to take care of Luo Fan and Taoist Bei Shi. After all, these cultivators were his disciples, so he naturally did not care. But for the two of them, even their knowledge and cultivation realm were far inferior to theirs. It was impossible for them to treat such existences as equals. Since that was the case, staying by their side would only make them annoyed. Hearing Taoist Mysterious Turtle's refusal, the cultivators who had made the request naturally felt a little regretful. After all, among the three of them, each of their cultivation realm was countless times higher than theirs. Just a casual instruction from them would be a great harvest for them. Traveling with them was naturally an excellent opportunity to reap benefits. Now that they had been rejected, they might not feel regretful. Of course, even if they felt regretful, they did not dare to raise any objections. Even if Taoist Mysterious Turtle appeared to be kind, even if they were his disciples, the strong were strong and the weak were weak. The weak opposing the strong was a provocation that could cost lives. After dismissing the crowd, Taoist Mysterious Turtle said with some shame, "These little guys have no eyesight at all. My friend is too serious. In fact, it doesn't matter even if they follow us." Luo Fan chuckled. "Forget it, I'm a little annoyed with them. Let's go," Taoist Bei Shi said with a smile. His words, of course, did not necessarily mean that he was really annoyed with them in his heart. It was just a gesture he needed to make. "Please lead the way, my friend." Luo Fan did not say anything more and said with a smile. Taoist Mysterious Turtle nodded, turned into a ray of light, and rushed straight in the southwest direction. Luo Fan and Taoist Beishur were also behind him, flying up at the same time and following behind him, heading in the same direction. A distance of more than 10 trillion miles was naturally nothing to Luo Fan and the others. If they wanted to, they could even reach that place in a breath's time. However, it was obvious that now the three of them had to be wary of each other and could not advance at full speed at will. The reason was very simple. For example, since Taoist Mysterious Turtle was leading the way, it was naturally not appropriate for him to directly take a step forward and completely disappear without a trace. In that case, logically speaking, Luo Fan should indeed be able to sense his destination. But what if, since he was leading the way, it was natural that he had to consider everything that could possibly be overlooked? This was the way to treat a guest. Therefore, he could only slow down. He was not slow, but he could not rush to the target location at a speed that was not too fast either. Using this method of travel, it took the three of them half a day to reach the place where Chun Gong Island was located. Along the way, they had also seen many bright rays of light rushing in the same direction as them, among which there were even quite a number of cultivators who were at a higher level than Luo Fan in terms of cultivation realm, which was higher than level 3 pseudo-saint cultivators. This made Luo Fan finally feel what a magnificent world he was in. Qingong Island was extremely vast. At the very least, it was about 100 times larger than the island that Taoist Mysterious Turtle had refined into a magic treasure. In this sea region, it really was like a vast and boundless continent. There were countless buildings on this island. There were all kinds of buildings densely packed together. They covered almost half of the island's surface, the remaining half. There were also all kinds of uneven terrain that could not be used to build buildings, rivers, and some essential forest and garden landscapes. And at this time on the entire island, there were thousands of pseudo-saint auras present. And under the pseudo-saint auras, there were also 10 times more auras of quasi-saints. There were even more auras below the level of quasi-saints. Apart from the auras of cultivators, there were also many buildings on this island. There were also many ordinary living beings. They lived on this island as if they were in an ordinary country, whether they were laborers, businessmen, scholars, or officials. There were all kinds of them, showing all kinds of signs of the mortal world. After arriving at Shungong Island, Taoist Mysterious Turtle slowed down again and flew at an even slower speed on the island. As he flew, he explained to Luo Fan, "The owner of this island is called Revered One, a powerful level 9 pseudo-saint supremacy. It is because of his strength that he can suppress many cultivators, making them not dare to act rashly and abide by the trading rules on this island. Fellow Taoist Luo Fan, you must be careful here. Do not touch the taboo." Revered One, Luo Fan could not help but be shocked when he heard this. There was actually a level 9 pseudo-saint cultivator on this island. This was beyond his expectations. From what he could sense, although there were thousands of pseudo-saints on this island, and there were even no lack of level 6 and level 7 pseudo-saints, there were very few level 8 pseudo-saints, let alone level 9 pseudo-saints. Yes, Revered One is an extremely powerful supremacy. Even my master has praised him. Taoist Bei sure hurriedly said when he saw Luo Fan, so surprised. Obviously, he was worried that Luo Fan would not know the severity of the situation and anger Revered One. After all, Luo Fan looked like a hothead no matter how he looked at it. Back then, when facing the level 6 pseudo-saint Taoist Mysterious Turtle, he did not even say a single word to Revered One. He was not sure if Luo Fan would do the same to Revered One. "I see. Fellow Taoist, don't worry. I won't be reckless." Luo Fan instantly knew what they were worried about when he saw their expressions, and a smile appeared on his face. "Of course we trust you." Taoist Mysterious Turtle smiled awkwardly. Taoist Beishur also chuckled at the side. From the looks of it, they seemed to have already believed Luo Fan's words, but Luo Fan did not have to guess to know what they were thinking in their hearts. They must be cursing. The three of them soon arrived at an area in the center of the island. This was where the pseudo-sacred realm cultivators stayed, and where they traded with each other. Almost everyone who flew in the sky and walked on the ground here was a pseudo-saint cultivator. Even those who were not pseudo-saint cultivators were servants that followed the pseudo-saint cultivators. However, even though there were so many pseudo-saint cultivators, it did not mean that Luo Fan and the other two did not attract attention when they arrived. On the contrary, when the three of them landed, the pseudo-saint cultivators nearby could not help but pay attention to them. There was no other reason. Even though there were so many pseudo-saint cultivators around, most of them were pseudo-saint below level 5. There were very few pseudo-saint cultivators that were above level 5, and each of them was very ostentatious. Under such circumstances, one could imagine how conspicuous it was for a level 6 pseudo-saint and a level 7 pseudo-saint to suddenly arrive together. How could they not pay attention to them? As for Luo Fan, who was following them, he was only a level 3 pseudo-saint. In comparison, he was so inconspicuous that he was naturally not worthy of their attention. Today is the first day. In the past, there wouldn't have been any major trade fairs. Let's just walk around and have a look, Taoist God Turtle said to Luo Fan. All right. Luo Fan looked at the pseudo-saint cultivators who had worlds suspended in front of them as if they were setting up stalls on the ground. Those pseudo-saint cultivators who were so high up in the outside world that they could destroy an island with a slap and create countless worlds with a single thought were actually like secular peddlers here, setting up stalls on both sides of the road. Even if they used worlds as support to set up their stalls, even if there were worlds suspended in front of them to store the goods they wanted to sell, it did not change the nature of their behavior. Since they were going to walk around, the three of them naturally would not gather together again. Although Taoist God Turtle and Taoist Bay sure brought Luo Fan here to broaden his horizons, it did not mean that they would always be by Luo Fan's side. After greeting each other, Taoist God Turtle and Taoist Bay sure left, leaving Luo Fan curiously looking at the goods placed on both sides of the road. They were all pseudo-saint cultivators, so it was not a problem for them to open up worlds and create universes. Chapter 13:20. After walking around for half a day, Luo Fan felt like his horizons had been broadened. There were many strange things, and many of them even made Luo Fan want to take them for himself. As he walked, he suddenly noticed a small stall by the side of the road, selling a world. He could not help but be slightly shocked. The world was extremely unique. It seemed like a dream world, yet it also seemed like a real world at the same time. There were some indescribable mysteries in it. A world like this seemed to be displayed by the level 7 pseudo-saint that he encountered during the inheritance test of the Buddha Supreme. With a thought, Luo Fan walked forward and said to the level 2 pseudo-saint that was selling the world, "Is this the world that you're looking for?" The level 2 pseudo-saint had the appearance of a young lady. She was not extremely beautiful, but there was a sense of gentleness in her, causing others to naturally have a good impression of her. When the level 2 pseudo-saint that looked like a young lady heard Luo Fan's question, she glanced over and saw through Luo Fan's cultivation realm. Her expression turned slightly stern as she said, "That's right. I accidentally created this world. Although it's not very mysterious, it's still quite mysterious. That's why I want to exchange it for something that's beneficial to my cultivation." "I wonder what you're looking for in exchange?" Luo Fan asked. Generally speaking, things like equivalents no longer existed for beings who had reached the pseudo-sage level. It was even to the extent that it didn't exist for cultivators at the first heaven realm or above. The reason was simple. It was because cultivators above the innate grand Luo realm already possessed the ability to create worlds. Since they already possessed the ability to create worlds, it was extremely easy for them to create some matter. In that case, they could spend some time to create anything that could be used as an ordinary equivalent. It could be said that they could create as many as they wanted. How could they use something that everyone acknowledged as an ordinary equivalent? Therefore, for cultivators above the innate grand Luo realm, they wanted to trade. Hence, they could only barter for something. In other words, what do they want to sell, what do they want to get, and what do they want to buy? What do they have? The two could only discuss and see if they were compatible with each other. If they were not compatible, then the transaction could not proceed. If they were compatible, it would naturally be a happy ending for both of them. Upon hearing this, the level 2 pseudo-sage cultivator nodded. I want a half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure. Half-step pseudo-sanctuary level treasure. Luo Fan was slightly taken aback upon hearing that. Then, he came to a realization. He knew that this level 2 pseudo-saint was probably prepared for his own disciples or disciples. Therefore, he said, half-step pseudo-saint treasure is fine. What kind of half-step pseudo-sage treasure do you want? Hearing Luo Fan's words, the second-level pseudo-sage couldn't help but be overjoyed. It turned out that she had just casually mentioned it. In fact, she had already been prepared to be rejected, and then put forward some conditions that were inferior. He raised his hand, and a small ball of spiritual light condensed in front of him. He sent it to Luo Fan and said, "This is the characteristic that a half-step pseudo-sage treasure should have. I hope you can help me." Luo Fan raised his hand and received the spiritual light. He instantly received the infinite information contained in the spiritual light. In the blink of an eye, he understood what kind of treasure this second-level pseudo-sage wanted. What she wanted was a complete magic treasure embryo. This magic treasure possessed an extremely special nature. The various restrictions and techniques constructed within it could be easily changed. The existence that obtained this magic treasure would be able to easily change the magic treasure into the form that they desired. If necessary, he could even use some special methods that he had already prepared to upgrade this half-step pseudo-holiness treasure to the true pseudo-holiness grade. Very good design. Luo Fan could not help but praise after seeing the various secrets of this treasure. Thank you, fellow Taoist. I wonder how long it will take for you to refine such a treasure? The second-level pseudo-sage asked carefully. Very soon. Luo Fan smiled slightly. With a thought, he spread out his right hand in his sleeve. Then, the entire demon realm suddenly underwent countless changes. Each of these changes was extremely subtle. Even the cultivators who were constantly sensing the entire demon realm would find it extremely difficult to notice these changes. The final target of these changes was Luo Fan's right hand that was in his sleeve at this moment. A ball of strange things was condensed on his right hand. None of the pseudo-sages present could notice the changes here. At most, some of the fifth-level pseudo-sages vaguely felt that something was wrong. They only felt that there seemed to be some kind of abnormal situation nearby. However, they just thought that a certain pseudo-sage was experimenting, so they did not pay too much attention to it. Soon, they focused their attention elsewhere. Even the woman in front of Luo Fan could not notice the obvious changes at all. She only knew that this pseudo-sage who had a higher cultivation realm than her seemed to be doing something. After a while, Luo Fan stretched out his right hand with a fist-sized, golden pill-like strange thing in his hand. He extended it to the woman and said, "Take a look and see if this half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure meets your requirements." The second-level pseudo-sage was really horrified at this moment, and a look of disbelief appeared on her face. She had originally been prepared to wait for thousands of years. Although this was a little slow for a transaction, she wanted a half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure and nothing else. However, she didn't expect that in just a few breaths, before she could even figure out what the person in front of her had done, the magic treasure that she wanted was already placed in front of her. How unbelievable and shocking was this? While exclaiming in shock, she did not dare to be negligent. She hurriedly took the fist-sized pill and carefully sensed it. After a while, she nodded and praised, "Fellow Taoist is really powerful. I'm really impressed that you managed to refine such a treasure so quickly. This is a world. From now on, it belongs to you." That pill was not the true appearance of the half-step false holy treasure, but it was just a cover that Luo Fan had casually used to conceal the appearance of the half-step false holy treasure. If someone obtained this half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure, as long as they refined it according to the method, they would naturally be able to change it into a special form and give it special mysteries. As the second-level pseudo-sage said, she pressed the world that was originally placed in front of her into a fist-sized pill and handed it to Luo Fan. Luo Fan nodded with a smile. After taking the pill, he sensed it slightly. Sure enough, the world contained the aura of some special world. It seemed to contain some of the mysteries of the special world that the 7-level pseudo-sage had opened up. Fellow Taoist, please wait. The 2nd-level pseudo-sage saw that Luo Fan was about to turn around and leave. He gritted his teeth. He said, "Oh, is there anything else?" Luo Fan stopped in his tracks. He asked curiously. The transaction had been completed. The customer who stayed now either had something good or needed help with something. Either way, it was something that interested Luo Fan. Seeing that Luo Fan had stopped, the 2nd-level pseudo-sage was slightly happy and said, "I wonder if you can refine a level 1 pseudo-saint grade treasure." Level 1 pseudo-saint grade treasure? That's a bit troublesome. Even if I can refine it, it's not that simple. It won't be as fast as before. Luo Fan frowned. With his current level of use of the law of causality, he could at most create a half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure out of thin air. It was still a little difficult for him to forge a pseudo-sage level Dharma treasure. If he had to create one, he could only first create a half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure and then use the law of causality several times to upgrade this half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure to the pseudo-saint grade. This way, not only would it be 1,000 times more troublesome, the time it would take would definitely be much longer than creating a half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure. Hearing Luo Fan's answer, the 2nd-level pseudo-sage couldn't help but be overjoyed and said, "It's good to be slow. It's good to be slow. I have actually inadvertently opened up tens of thousands of worlds with special characteristics. If you can create a true pseudo-saint grade treasure, I will exchange all of those worlds with you. What do you think?" Saying that, she looked at Luo Fan eagerly. Hearing her words, Luo Fan couldn't help but be shocked. He was not surprised that this level 2 pseudo-sage cultivator wanted a level 1 pseudo-sage artifact. After all, the greatest use of pseudo-sage artifact was for a cultivator at the half-step pseudo-sage level to refine this artifact. With the help of this artifact, they would be able to raise their cultivation realm to the half-step pseudo-sage level. Therefore, the reason why this 2nd-level pseudo-sage wanted a half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure was, of course, to prepare it for her relatives or disciples who were half-step pseudo-saint grade. Compared to a half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure, a 1st-level pseudo-saint grade treasure had more magical uses and was more helpful in raising one's cultivation realm. There is even no need for a cultivator to refine a half-step pseudo-saint grade treasure. As long as they could understand the wonders of the treasure, they could naturally become a 1st-level pseudo-saint. This directly eliminated the bottleneck that a half-step pseudo-saint grade cultivator would definitely encounter in the process of upgrading to a 1st-level pseudo-saint. For a half-step pseudo-saint grade cultivator, it was very beneficial. For a 2nd-level pseudo-saint grade cultivator, she would certainly be willing to pay a huge price for it. What surprised Luo Fan was that this 2nd-level pseudo-sage actually dared to claim that there were tens of thousands of worlds with special characteristics. If these special worlds were like the world that he had obtained now, which was accidentally opened up after countless experiments, then how many billions of worlds would she have to open up to be able to accumulate tens of thousands of worlds? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but have some doubts in his eyes. The special worlds that you're talking about, are they the same as this world? Are they accidentally born and can't be repeated? Of course, how would I dare to lie to you? If you don't believe me, I can take you there to have a look, the 2nd-level pseudo-sage said. With that, she looked at Luo Fan eagerly and expectantly, obviously hoping that Luo Fan would agree to go with her. Luo Fan had the same intention, so he nodded and said, "Where is it? I have to take a good look. If there really are tens of thousands of such worlds, then even if it takes a bit more effort, I'll be able to refine a grade 1 pseudo-holy treasure for you." Hearing this, the 2nd-level pseudo-sage treasure showed a look of joy on her face. She waved her hand, and a very ordinary major chiliocosm appeared beside her. This major chiliocosm was extremely vast. Although it was far inferior to a major chiliocosm like the demon realm, It was much stronger than an ordinary major kiliacosm. Obviously, this second-level pseudo-sage had placed her tens of thousands of worlds in this major kiliacosm. Please, fellow Taoist. The second-level pseudo-sage waved her hand above the major kiliacosm, and a door appeared in front of them. Seeing this, Luo Fan nodded his head. Without hesitation, he stepped into the boundless world. The woman also stepped into the major kiliacosm and appeared next to Luo Fan. This was a major kiliacosm. It looked like a boundless void. In comparison, it seemed similar to the Earth universe after the world shattered, but there was an essential difference. The sky full of stars. They were worlds. The void. It was boundless nothingness. It looked more like the starry sky of the demon realm. I'm Luo Fan. How should I address you? Luo Fan looked at the countless worlds. He couldn't help but feel impressed and smiled. The woman was stunned at first, then smiled. I'm Hu Yun. Greetings, fellow Taoist Luo Fan. So it's you, fellow Taoist Hu Yun. I didn't expect you to be so interested in opening up worlds. I admit that I've opened up many worlds, but compared to you, I'm still far behind, Luo Fan said with a smile. Hu Yun finally understood why Luo Fan was suddenly interested in getting to know her. She was relieved and smiled. I've been fascinated by worlds since I was young. Ever since I became an innate grand heavenly Luo and gained the ability to open up worlds, I've spent almost all my time opening up worlds. It's been hundreds of billions of years now, and I've only managed to accumulate so many worlds. What's there to be embarrassed about? I can't wait to admire you. To be able to open up so many different and mysterious worlds, fellow Taoist ability to open up worlds is the second person I've seen in my life. Your future is definitely bright and boundless, Luo Fan said with a smile. The second person? Although the woman spoke modestly, she was actually extremely proud of her ability to open up worlds. When she heard Luo Fan say that she was only the second person he'd seen, she couldn't help but feel competitive. She asked, May I know who's the person with the strongest ability to open up worlds that you've seen? Which person? I don't know his name. It's just that I fought with him once by chance. At that time, the many methods he used to open up the world were really dazzling. If we weren't enemies at that time, I would have even thought of getting to know him, Luo Fan said with a smile. Even you don't know? Hu Yun couldn't help but show a look of pity. Yeah, although it's a little regretful, I'd rather not see him again, Luo Fan said with slight regret. Why is that? Hu Yun couldn't help but be surprised. Because he's a level 7 pseudo-saint. Back when I fought him, his strength was restricted for some reason, which allowed me to take advantage of him and exchange a few moves with him. If I meet him again, I won't have such a good thing anymore. If his strength isn't restricted, I'm not confident that I can defeat him, Luo Fan said with a smile. Hearing this, Hu Yun's expression slightly changed. Even in her opinion, a level 7 pseudo-saint was a supreme existence that could crush countless of her with a single finger. Offending such an existence was equivalent to sending one's life to the tip of a blade. At this moment, how could she dare to compete with that existence in terms of opening up worlds? She even felt a little unbearable when Luo Fan said that her ability to open up worlds was only inferior to his. She felt that the praise was too much. As they spoke, the two of them had already arrived at a corner of the vast, great thousand world. In this world, there were hundreds of millions of worlds densely packed together. There were all kinds of worlds. There were great thousand worlds, medium thousand worlds, and small thousand worlds. Each one of them was like a star in the universe, emitting all kinds of light in the void, illuminating the entire world in a very beautiful way. It was natural for people to feel an inexplicable shock in their hearts when they saw it. The place that Luo Fan and Hu Yun had arrived at was a corner of the boundless world. Here, there was a faint ring of gray light that surrounded several tens of thousands of worlds, separating this area from the other areas and allowing these several tens of thousands of worlds to exist independently of the other worlds in the sky. When Luo Fan saw these worlds, his eyes couldn't help but light up. Among these worlds, not all of them had mysteries that moved him, but each of them had characteristics that couldn't be replicated. In other words, the birth of these worlds was the result of many coincidences. Even if he wanted to create a similar world again, it would be difficult for him to do so. Even if he used all kinds of methods to simulate the circumstances of the creation of these worlds, the worlds he obtained in the end would definitely be different from these worlds. It would be impossible to create a world that was exactly the same as these worlds. In addition, more than half of these worlds contain mysteries that Luo Fan found difficult to understand. They vaguely felt like the worlds that were casually opened by the level 7 pseudo-saint. In an instant, Luo Fan decided that he definitely couldn't let go of these tens of thousands of worlds. He had to obtain them. After thinking it through, Luo Fan said to Hu Yun, "If these tens of thousands of worlds are the worlds that fellow Taoist mentioned, then I can agree to this deal." Chapter 13:21. Although these tens of thousands of worlds were extremely precious to Hu Yun, who was a level 2 pseudo-sage, and they were the only existence that she couldn't replicate even if she wanted to. However, compared to the level 1 pseudo-sage treasure that she wanted, these tens of thousands of worlds were nothing at all. For a level 2 pseudo-sage, if it was an ordinary magic treasure, not to mention a half-step pseudo-sage treasure, even a level 1 pseudo-sage treasure would be nothing to her. At most, it would take her tens of thousands of years, or at most hundreds of thousands of years to refine one. This amount of time was really nothing to a level 2 pseudo-sage existence. It was like a blink of an eye. However, it was obvious that the magic treasure that Hu Yun wanted was not an ordinary magic treasure. Compared to other ordinary magic treasures, the magic treasure that she wanted could not have a strong aura that belonged to her. Moreover, the restrictions, runes, and structure of this magic treasure were extremely special. Even if time was accelerated, it would leave traces on it, thus changing its structure. This caused this magic treasure to be biased and lose the ability to be refined, changed, and turned into a magic treasure that was absolutely compatible with her. These two characteristics caused her to have to expel her own aura all the time if she wanted to refine this magic treasure, causing countless methods that could speed up the formation of this magic treasure to be unable to be used. Similarly, because time could not be accelerated, she could only grind this magic treasure bit by bit and raise the level of this magic treasure bit by bit. Normally speaking, to refine a magic treasure, there was a basic rule. Some time could be shortened, but some time had to be experienced no matter what. If one wanted to turn something into a half-step pseudo-sage treasure, or even a level 1 pseudo-sage treasure, the time needed would add up to at least hundreds of millions of years. Such a long time was actually not too long for a level 2 pseudo-sage existence. However, for those who needed to use this half-step pseudo-sage treasure, or even level 1 pseudo-sage treasure to raise their cultivation realm, this period of time had obviously exceeded their endurance. It was precisely because of this. Hu Yun. Thus, he had no choice but to pay such a huge price in exchange for Luo Fan to help him refine a grade 1 pseudo-sage treasure. Seeing that Luo Fan had agreed, Hu Yun was overjoyed and didn't care about anything else. He raised his hand and stroked the air in front of him. In an instant, the gray light that enveloped the tens of thousands of worlds slowly shrank and turned into a cocoon of light that enveloped the tens of thousands of worlds. It landed in her hand and turned into a fist-sized pill. When the cocoon of light entered her hand, a hint of reluctance appeared in Hu Yun's eyes, but it was replaced by determination in the end. She handed the cocoon of light to Li Hao. Li Hao smiled faintly, took the cocoon of light, and directly put it into his universe within sleeve. He said, "Many thanks for your help, fellow Taoist." With that, he did not delay any further. With a thought, countless changes appeared in the demon realm, in this world, and even among the hundreds of millions of worlds in this world. In the end, the countless changes condensed in one place, causing a pillar-like thing to appear in his hand out of thin air. This thing was exactly the same as the half-step pseudo-sage treasure that he had given to Hu Yun previously. Obviously, it was in the form of the half-step pseudo-sage treasure. After this thing appeared, there was naturally an aura that belonged to the half-step pseudo-sage treasure. The supreme power swept across the sky and cleansed the void, causing the hundreds of millions of worlds in the void to instantly feel the sudden appearance of some great and noble existence. They felt an indescribable shock in their own nature. If Luo Fan used this method of using the second level of the law of causality outside, Huyin would naturally not be able to feel it, because her cultivation realm was not high enough. However, this method that he was using now was in the world that Huyin had opened up, in a place that was completely under Huyin's control. All of these changes naturally couldn't escape her senses. In an instant, Huyin sensed the numerous, extremely subtle changes that had occurred in the entire world, and she faintly knew that these changes contained boundless, inconceivable profundities, and it might be related to the next step of her cultivation. However, although she knew this, she could not understand the mysteries. Even if she included all the changes in her senses, she was still a loss in the end. She could not find the root of these changes at all, nor could she understand how these changes formed such incredible power that directly created the half-step pseudo-sage treasure in front of her. However, Luo Fan did not care about what she was thinking. Seeing that the half-step pseudo-sage treasure was formed, he smiled slightly. With a thought, countless more changes appeared between heaven and earth, in countless worlds, and in the entire demon realm. In the end, they gathered in one place and integrated into this half-step pseudo-sage treasure, causing the power of this treasure to increase again, and it was one step closer to the real pseudo-sage level. Of course, it was only one step closer. It was still far from the real pseudo-sage level. Luo Fan did not hesitate. If the first time did not work, he would do it the second time. If the second time did not work, he would do it the third time. He kept using the second level of the law of causality, using the power of the universe and the magical effect of the law of causality to push this half-step pseudo-sage treasure to the real pseudo-sage level. After doing this for more than 1,000 times, he felt a shock in his hand. The pill in his hand suddenly enlarged by 10 times, then shrank to 1/10 of its original size, and then enlarged to 10 times of its original size. After repeating this for a total of 81 times, it returned to its normal size. Then, an incomparably powerful aura that belonged to the pseudo-sage level soared into the sky from the pill, causing the entire world to shake violently. Even the many worlds in the void that acted as stars trembled slightly during this process, faintly showing signs of being unable to withstand the impact of this aura and becoming chaotic. Seeing this, Luo Fan had a thought, and the aura in the pill suddenly disappeared. It directly turned into the most ordinary pill. No special phenomenon appeared, and it did not cause any more abnormalities. At this time, Huyin finally reacted. She hurriedly sorted out the entire world and restored the many worlds that had been displaced to their normal positions. After everything was done, she looked at the seemingly ordinary pill lying in Luo Fan's hand in disbelief. Just now, she clearly sensed all the changes that occurred in the process of Luo Fan using the second level of the law of causality for more than 1,000 times. At least in this world, she could clearly sense all the changes in the billions of worlds in the void. However, the more she sensed, the more confused she became. The more confused she was, the more incredible she was. All of these changes were meaningless in her eyes. They seemed to be changing for the sake of changing. However, that was what she could not understand. The changes that she could not understand at all eventually pushed a half-step pseudo-sage treasure to the pseudo-sage level so easily. Moreover, during this process, he did not violate any of the requirements that she had set, nor was he contaminated with any aura that she did not want to be contaminated with. This kind of inconceivable change almost toppled her worldview. It made her wonder if she had cultivated for hundreds of millions of years in the past for nothing. Was the person in front of her a real cultivator, and she had always been at the level of an ordinary mortal? How is this possible? It's just a realm difference. How can the difference be so huge? At this time, this was the only thought that echoed in her mind. Because of this thought, She did not reach out to take the pill in Luo Fan's hand for a while. Luo Fan did not know why she did this at first, but he soon figured it out. He could not help but smile and say, "Mr. Huyun, have you never come into contact with karma?" Karma? I know. All the actions and thoughts of all living beings will give rise to karma, causing living beings to be connected with other living beings. Eventually, when the karma accumulates, it may lead to extremely uncontrollable consequences, Huyun said after recovering from her thoughts. Luo Fan chuckled and did not deny it. He just said, "This is the level 1 pseudo-sage treasure that you wanted. Fortunately, I did not disappoint you." Huyun took the pill in Luo Fan's hand in a daze. She instinctively sensed the mystery of the pill, but she was obviously a little absent-minded. After a while, her eyes suddenly lit up, and she asked in surprise, "Could it be that what you used just now was a karma technique?" Luo Fan just chuckled, but did not speak, nor did he confirm her words. If he continued to speak, it would involve his cultivation. Given the friendship between him and Huyun, it was not enough for him to tell her the mystery of his cultivation. Being able to point out the cause and effect of her own methods was already an explanation for the bargain she had taken this time. As for whether she could comprehend it and how much she could comprehend, it all depended on Huyun herself. Although Huyun was very anxious and even had the thought of prying open Luo Fan's mouth and making Luo Fan answer her questions, she could only give up in the end. After all, it was up to him whether he would answer or not. She could not force him at all. If she really asked, it would only waste the little friendship that she had accumulated before, and it would not be worth it. After thinking about it, she could only sigh and apologize to Luo Fan for being rude. She then asked Luo Fan to leave this world. I wonder how that level 7 pseudo-sage existence was able to use the world he created in battle. On the way, Huyun forced herself to shift her thoughts away from the karma and asked another question that she was very concerned about. In her life, the thing that she was most interested in was opening up a world. It was also because of opening up a world that her combat ability was slightly weaker than ordinary level 2 pseudo-sage existences, even though she had reached the cultivation realm. This had actually become a sore point in her heart, and she was still brooding over it. Hearing Huyun's words, Luo Fan smiled and said, "That cultivator's methods are superb. Not only did he focus on many special worlds, but he could also open up many special worlds that were different from ordinary worlds at will. Furthermore, he integrated the ability to open up a world into his body, and he could even create a world just by exhaling. His methods are superb, but I was exhausted and couldn't control myself." Special world integrated the ability to open up a world into the world around him, and he could create a world just by exhaling. Huyun felt as if she had been struck by lightning and stood there in a daze. Many incredible words and images flashed in her eyes, and countless spiritual lights flickered. If any mortal saw the world in her eyes at this moment, they might not be able to withstand the impact of the complex changes. Even their mind would be shattered, and even their soul would be erased because of the many changes contained within. She actually comprehended it. It seems that she has been at the peak level 2 pseudo-sage for a long time. As soon as Luo Fan noticed the changes in Huyun, he couldn't help but be surprised, and he immediately made a guess in his heart. They were still in Huyun's world, and as Huyun fell into that state of confusion, the entire world seemed to be faintly shaking. This kind of shaking, however, it was different from the shaking when the half-step pseudo-sage treasure was formed and the shaking when the level 1 pseudo-sage treasure was born. This kind of shaking seemed to come directly from the source of the world. It was directly produced by the entire world itself. It was born from the depths of the world. The shaking of the entire world became more and more intense as time passed. It was getting more and more obvious, and the appearance it produced was getting more and more obvious in Luo Fan's eyes. However, all the living beings and existences in the hundreds of millions of worlds felt nothing at all. To them, the entire world had not changed at all, and everything was exactly the same as before. During this shaking, Huyun's aura began to gradually break through the restrained state and began to sweep in all directions. This aura was the aura of a level 2 pseudo-sage peak. The power contained in it was strong enough to suppress any level 1 pseudo-sage to the point of losing themselves. However, to Luo Fan, such an aura was like a cool breeze. It only made him feel comfortable, but did not bring him any impact. However, although these auras did not bring him any impact, Luo Fan still retreated quickly and appeared in the gap between this world and the demon realm. He was in a state where he was about to leave this world, but he had not completely left it. He stood there quietly and looked at Huyun. If Huyun only experienced such a change after he left, he naturally wouldn't care. However, at this time, she suddenly fell into such a state in the process of talking to him. Naturally, he couldn't just ignore it and leave directly. If that was the case, it would obviously be too ungentlemanly. Therefore, at this time, although his relationship with Huyun was not deep, he could only stay here to protect her. In that world, after Huyun's aura swept through every part of the world, it began to retract, and in an instant, it shrank into an area with a radius of billions of miles around her body. The aura of a level 2 pseudo-sage peak was strong enough to break through all obstacles. However, none of the living beings in this world that were like stars in the sky felt the change in this aura. It was not because the aura had penetrated deep into the source of the world, but because although the aura had enveloped these worlds, it had not seeped into them. It was as if Huyun still had a bit of instinct left in her to control her aura, preventing her aura from invading those worlds, causing those worlds to be affected by her aura, preventing the living beings in those worlds from being harmed by her aura. After the aura around Huyun's body was compressed to a radius of billions of miles, it began to undergo countless changes. Many mysterious worlds began to appear in her aura. There were many of these worlds, and all of them were extremely wonderful and strange. They vaguely looked like the tens of thousands of worlds that she had given to Luo Fan before, but they contained some of the feeling of the special worlds that Luo Fan had seen in the hands of the level 7 pseudo-sage. These worlds were born and destroyed as they were born, and in the aura area within a radius of billions of miles, they were like stars in the starry sky. Every time these worlds were born and destroyed, it was equivalent to the stars in the starry sky flickering. In other words, it was like the stars in the starry sky blinking. Every time the countless worlds were destroyed and reborn, their appearances would be slightly different from before. And every time there was a difference, it made the world move in a more wonderful direction that was even more beyond the scope of Luo Fan's understanding. Moreover, every time these worlds were born, the speed at which they were born would become faster than before. This went on for a long time. Suddenly, all the worlds were completely annihilated, and the aura that belonged to Huyun continued to shrink. The shrinking speed was so fast that in the blink of an eye, it had shrunk from a radius of billions of miles to a completely restrained state. At this moment, Huyun's body trembled slightly. In an instant, countless worlds were born all over her body. Around her skirt, between her fingers, around her hair, everything was wrapped up by the endless worlds. The tiny worlds around her body trembled continuously, and they were born and destroyed continuously. It seemed like she had become a figure formed by the accumulation of countless worlds. This kind of change lasted for a while before it stopped. Chapter 1322. Impressively, although Huyun had obtained great benefits, and even broke through the bottleneck between level 2 and level 3, she still needed to wait for an opportunity to truly step into the level 3 pseudo-sage realm. Of course, this opportunity was not the kind that she needed to wait for when she was stuck. Instead, it was a small opportunity that only needed a touch of the heart. This kind of opportunity could appear almost at any time. It might be in the next moment or a few years later. However, no matter what, because the biggest bottleneck had been broken through, this opportunity would come sooner or later. In other words, it was only a matter of time before he truly broke through and truly became a level 3 pseudo-sage. Although Huyun was in the midst of breaking through, she was very clear about everything around her. Naturally, she noticed Luo Fan's act of protecting her. She hurriedly came forward and bowed to Luo Fan. "Thank you for protecting me, fellow Taoist." You don't have to be so polite. Luo Fan smiled and waved his hand. Since fellow Taoist has completed your breakthrough, I shall take my leave. Fellow Taoist, please wait, Hu Yun said at this moment. This was the second time she said this after meeting Luo Fan. Is there anything else, fellow Taoist? Luo Fan smiled. I have to repay the kindness of fellow Taoist for your guidance. I see that fellow Taoist is interested in strange worlds. There is a world here that I accidentally obtained, and I am willing to give it to fellow Taoist to thank you for your guidance, Hu Yun said. If it was anything else, Luo Fan naturally wouldn't care too much. However, she was talking about strange worlds now. Luo Fan was very curious and couldn't help but say, it's not really a kindness, and I don't need fellow Taoist to repay me. However, I am really interested in the strange world that fellow Taoist mentioned, so I have to be thick-skinned to see it. Seeing this, Hu Yun's face lit up, and she said to Luo Fan, fellow Taoist, please wait a moment. Saying that, she didn't move at all, but the whole world began to change subtly. This kind of subtle change was extremely mysterious, and it spread across every inch of the world. It affected every rule and law in this world. It affected the billions of worlds in this world. Finally, amidst the changes, the void split open, and a beam of light appeared out of nowhere. He descended from a void. The landing point. It was in front of Hu Yun. Along with this beam of light, a strange sphere appeared from the source of the beam of light. It slowly descended from an unknown place in the void. Before long, he had already landed in front of Hu Yun. After the sphere fell, the beam of light flickered slightly and disappeared, as if it had never appeared in the first place. Hu Yun picked up the sphere and offered it to Meng Hao. This is the world. Please accept it, fellow Taoist. Luo Fan smiled. After thanking Hu Yun, he raised his hand and took the sphere. As soon as the sphere entered his hand, he could not help but change his expression. There was a look of disbelief on his face. He seemed to not dare to believe his own judgment. With a thought, his perception directly enveloped the sphere from inside to the outside, and everything in that world was included in his perception. As his perception progressed, shock finally appeared on his face. He raised his head and looked at Hu Yun. He opened his mouth, but for a moment, he did not know what to say or what to do. After a while, he handed the sphere to Hu Yun and said, "This world is too precious. The little contribution I made to fellow Taoist is not worth this world at all. Fellow Taoist, you should put this world away. Also, I have a suggestion for fellow Taoist. It's best if fellow Taoist doesn't let other cultivators know about the existence of this world. Otherwise, it might bring about a disaster." Hu Yun's expression changed greatly when he heard that. Even the aura that he had concealed so well could not be concealed anymore. The slight fluctuation caused the entire world to tremble slightly. Seeing this, Luo Fan hurriedly raised his hand and covered the sphere in his hand. In an instant, time and space changed, and a golden world instantly enveloped the sphere. Everything within the sphere was instantly isolated from the outside world. In this situation, even if someone who recognized that world stood in front of him now, they would not be able to recognize it. This was the first time Luo Fan had used his method of opening a world in front of Hu Yun. It was this method that made Hu Yun's face and ears flush red. She felt extremely ashamed. Looking at the method Luo Fan used to open a world, it was many times more exquisite than hers. Even the world that he opened up, although it was just casually opened up, was already of an extremely high level. It was much more powerful than the world that she had spent thousands of years to open up herself. And it was this kind of existence that had just used a magic treasure to exchange a world with her. Yet she had taken for granted and even felt a little proud. This was simply showing off in front of an expert. How could she not feel ashamed? How could she accept it indifferently? Luo Fan did not care how shocked Hu Yun was by his method of opening up a world. At this moment, he quietly sensed the world in his hand and found that the four basic existences of the world were all extremely powerful, and the structure was extremely tight. It was enough to completely conceal all information and make it difficult for any cultivator that he knew to pass through the barrier of this world. He only heaved a sigh of relief when he sensed that it was the sphere that existed in the world. You must be careful, my friend. This thing is of great importance. Even a level 9 pseudo-sage existence would go crazy over it. If anyone knows that this thing is in your hands, no one will be able to save you. Luo Fan said solemnly. Seeing this, Huyin forced herself to calm down. However, she did not take the world in Luo Fan's hand. Instead, she said, "Since this thing is so precious, why don't you accept it?" Luo Fan frowned and said, "Didn't I say before that this thing is too precious? If it is my subordinate, I will feel guilty. Don't worry, my friend. No matter how precious this thing is, since I have already given it to you, you are naturally my friend. Even if it is too precious, it is my business and has nothing to do with you. Why do you need to feel guilty?" Huyin became even more determined. Luo Fan looked at the world in his hand, and his expression changed. In the end, he sighed and said, "It seems that if I don't explain clearly, you won't take it back. Fine, you first strengthen the world and use all methods you can to isolate all detection from the outside world. Then, I will explain to you what this world is." Hearing this, Huyin wanted to refute immediately, but in the end, she could not suppress her curiosity. She still wanted to know what was going on in that world, what mysteries it contained. Therefore, nodding, he raised his hand and made a hand seal. Countless worlds in that world trembled slightly, and rays of light were emitted from those worlds. In an instant, they poured into the void of the outside world. In an instant, the entire world was dyed in colorful colors, a strange world that was constantly changing. "My friend, please enter the world," Huyin said to Luo Fan at this time. Hearing this, Luo Fan knew that this change had most likely reached a place that would affect the gap between this world and the demon realm. Without hesitation, he stepped into that world. He came to Huyun's side. The movements of Huyun's hands became faster. At this time, the strange lights emitted from countless worlds seemed to have started to fuse. They gradually converged and melted. Unknowingly, all the colors disappeared. The entire world seemed to be covered by a strange, dusky fog. The strength of the world's space and the stability of time seemed to have suddenly increased by 10 times. He felt that even if he wanted to break through it, he would need to use many methods. Good method. Sensing this change, Luo Fan could not help but praise. Joy appeared on Huyun's face when she heard this praise. Clearly, she was quite proud of her method of using other worlds to strengthen this world. After a while, this change subsided, and the entire world returned to peace. However, Luo Fan faintly felt that his perception of the outside world had been weakened to the limit. It became faintly discernible, as if it had been cut off, but not completely cut off. Only when he sensed this did he feel a little relieved. The change that happened to this world just now was obviously external. The effect on the inside should be 1,000 times worse than the effect on the outside. However, the effect of the isolation on the inside had already reached such a degree. It could be imagined that if the cultivators outside wanted to investigate the situation in this world, it would obviously be even more difficult, even close to impossible. It was really dangerous just now. Luo Fan sighed. "I wonder why fellow friend was so cautious?" Huyin said. Luo Fan looked at Huyun, and his face could not help but have a rather strange expression. Seeing this, Huyun was even more puzzled. After a while, Luo Fan said, "Your luck is so good that I have never seen anything like it in my life. Why are you still a level 2 pseudo-sage cultivator?" This. How could Huyun expect Luo Fan to suddenly say such a thing? For a moment, she did not know how to react. Luo Fan sighed. Without waiting for Huyun's answer, he threw the world in his hand forward. The golden sphere changed slightly and gradually became transparent. As the world became transparent, the strange sphere that was wrapped in the world, the source of Luo Fan's shock, began to slowly disintegrate and gradually turned into a world. That world was boundless. In the center of it, there were 4 vast continents. However, These four continents were still extremely small areas in the entire world. Outside these four continents was a boundless ocean and an endless number of islands. In the entire world, the rules and laws were completely in line with the Great Tao. The aura of the entire world was neutral and peaceful, but contained a strong sense of destruction. Among the four continents and the many islands, there were no living beings with born Taoism aptitudes at all. There were only all kinds of strange and powerful beasts. It was already very obvious what kind of world such a world was. It was obviously the primordial world, a world that was regarded as a treasure by a level 9 pseudo-sage Buddhist supreme. It was an existence that was regarded as his lifetime inheritance, and a world that was regarded as the key to open the door to the Holy Land. This was also the reason why Luo Fan had such an unusual reaction when he sensed this world. Although such a primordial world was not too tempting to Luo Fan, one could imagine how precious it was. In fact, if it was a level 9 pseudo-sage existence, they would probably be willing to exchange everything they had for it. If such an existence was known by outsiders or level 9 pseudo-sage existences, misfortune would definitely follow. Even if it was Luo Fan himself, he would probably be overwhelmed to death by the many level 9 pseudo-sage existences after he obtained this world, let alone the level 2 pseudo-sage Huyan. Even Taoist Bei, Shi, and Taoist Shun Gui, if the two of them knew that Luo Fan possessed this primordial world, they would definitely fall out and snatch it. They would definitely turn hostile immediately and snatch it. There is absolutely no reason to reason with them. It was because of this consideration that Luo Fan was so nervous and cautious just now. This is the primordial world. It's the primordial world, Luo Fan sighed. Primordial world? What is a primordial world? Could it be the beginning of all worlds? Speaking of worlds, Hu Yun had forgotten everything else. She asked curiously. As someone who had an extraordinary obsession with the world, she had been continuously opening and creating worlds since the Khanate Daoyuo realm. She had not stopped until now. Of course, it was impossible for Hu Yun to be indifferent to a world that she had never heard of. Luo Fan could not help but smile bitterly and said, "Primordial world is just a name. It's not important at all. If you want, you can even name it Little Black or Little White. The most important thing is the use of this world, the meaning of this world." Huyan could not help but feel a little dissatisfied. Her obsession with the world was beyond imagination. Luo Fan's indifference to the name of the world was obviously not in line with her values. However, she also knew that not everyone was like her, so she did not say much. She only asked, "What is the use of this world? Why are you so nervous?" Luo Fan sighed and said, "This world has one of the greatest uses, and that is to give cultivators a chance that any cultivator dreams of." What chance? Huyan suddenly felt her heart beating faster. She faintly felt that what Luo Fan was going to say next would probably make her unable to control herself. As expected, Luo Fan said, "The chance to become a saint. The chance to become a saint." Huyan could not help but repeat. Her voice unknowingly became sharp and high-pitched, and she instantly lost control of her own power, causing the sound waves she spat out to instantly turn into a world. It was only after a long while that they dissipated and disappeared without a trace. It was even to the extent that her aura instantly broke through the barrier of her body and formed a vast universe around her. As it changed, it revealed all sorts of unimaginably peculiar sceneries. Sometimes it was like a lightning hell, and sometimes it was like a flaming heaven. These changes lasted for a long time before they disappeared along with the destruction of the Soundwave world. Even at this moment, Huyin was still very excited. Her face was red as she said, "Impossible." Luo Fan casually pushed the world towards Huyin. Seeing the world floating towards her, Huyin did not have time to think. She instinctively caught the world. It was as if she had caught something extremely fragile and precious. It was a world of difference compared to the casual attitude she had toward the world before. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. You will have to judge for yourself. However, I believe that as long as there is this rumor, it is enough for anyone to make a move against you. Therefore, you should try your best to keep this world." Luo Fan sighed. Hearing this, Hu Yun's expression kept changing. She wanted to push the world back to Luo Fan, but her hands felt heavy as if they were sealed by the world. No matter how hard she tried, she could not push it. That was for sure. What did cultivators cultivate for? Wasn't it to transcend? Wasn't it to be eternal? Wasn't it to not be destroyed? If it was an ordinary cultivator, they might have other goals such as revenge, pursuing power, and living a brilliant life. However, for those who could cultivate to the pseudo-sage realm, which one of them did not regard the goal of eternal life as their life's goal? Even if Hu Yun had an extraordinary obsession with the world, she was no exception. With such a mentality, a chance to become a sage was placed in front of her. Even if it was just a rumor that she had no idea whether it was true or not, it was almost impossible for her to push it out at this moment. Luo Fan quietly watched the changes in Hu Yun's expression and guessed what she would do. Will she directly leave this primordial world behind and make me stay here? He thought quietly. He could already predict that if Hu Yun wanted to leave this primordial world, then the second thing she would do would definitely be to fall out with him. She would directly gather the power of the entire world, or even billions of worlds, to kill him on the spot, so that he would not be able to expose the fact that this thing was in her hands. This was not difficult to speculate. If Hu Yun wanted to keep the chance to become a sage, she would naturally have to eliminate all future troubles. She would not let anyone know that this thing was in her hands. Even if there was a slight chance that it would be exposed, she would not let it go. Obviously, even if Luo Fan had personally pushed this opportunity into her hands just now, she still wouldn't be able to completely rest assured. This was the mentality of a normal living being. Even a pseudo-sage would not be able to avoid such a mentality. Luo Fan watched quietly and waited for the almost inevitable result. Chapter 1323. Hu Yun struggled for a while before she gradually calmed down. After that, she made a choice that surprised Luo Fan. She actually pushed the world in her hand towards Luo Fan and said, "Since I've already promised to give this primeval world to you, it naturally belongs to you. No matter how precious this primeval world is, it won't change this fact." As she spoke, her aura fluctuated, and the aura of a level 3 pseudo-sage was silently emitted from her body. At the same time, Hu Yun looked completely different from before, as if her essence had improved by countless times. Impressively, because of this difficult choice, she had broken through the realm that she originally needed a long time to break through. She broke through the shackles of a level 2 pseudo-sage and truly became a level 3 pseudo-sage, setting foot on the 3rd step of the 9 steps below the sage realm. Feeling this, Luo Fan's original doubts about whether she was testing him or not had completely disappeared. To be able to make a breakthrough in one's cultivation realm because of a single choice, such a choice would definitely be an incomparably conflicted choice. The result of such a choice would definitely be an incomparably painful result. Only then would the ripples in her heart and the conflict in her heart be able to make a breakthrough in her cultivation realm. If Hun Yun's choice had not been sincere and had only been a test, then she would not have been able to achieve such a breakthrough. At this time, she should still be a level 2 pseudo-sage. Now that she had become a level 3 pseudo-sage, there was no need to find out whether she was sincere or not. He could directly confirm that she was really going to give up this primeval world and the chance to become a sage. After understanding this, Luo Fan did not accept the world. He just looked at Hu Yun with an inexplicable gaze. This was not a choice that an ordinary cultivator could make. Even though Luo Fan had just said it casually, there was no evidence to prove that this world was really a chance to become a sage. There was no evidence to prove that this world really was a chance to become a sage. However, when a normal cultivator heard such a rumor, they would not care whether it was true or not. As long as there was a 1 in a billion chance, they would definitely do everything they could to obtain it. Not to mention that this thing originally belonged to him. Even if it wasn't, he would definitely do everything he could to obtain it. They would definitely pay any price to snatch it. After a while, Hu Yun's aura calmed down and returned to her body. His entire body returned to its original appearance, but a faint smile appeared on his face. Naturally, she could sense the changes in her body many times more clearly than Luo Fan. He broke through the limit of his cultivation realm. Stepping into a realm that she had always dreamed of was simply proof to her that the choice she had made before was correct. Therefore, her expression became even more determined. I hope you will accept this primordial world. When Luo Fan saw this, he sighed in admiration and said, "To be able to resist this kind of temptation, it's very impressive. Fellow Taoist abilities are truly amazing. I might as well." Hu Yin let out a faint smile and calmly said, "Not many people can do it. How can you take back what you've given away?" Not everyone can do it." Luo Fan merely chuckled and repeated himself. He didn't say anything else. However, his meaning was already very clear, and there was no need for any more words to explain. However, even at this point, Luo Fan didn't accept the idea that this was a primordial world. Though a primordial world like this was mysterious and was known as a chance to become a saint and was unimaginably valuable to Luo Fan, who had already seen through its uses, it really wasn't that tempting. More importantly, he already had a primordial world like this. Under these circumstances, this primordial world was just icing on the cake. At most, it would just be the icing on the cake. Its only use was to strengthen the power of the primordial world that he originally possessed. That would only bring him a little bit of benefit, but the drawbacks were giving him a huge headache. Unless he kills Hu Yun, the fact that he had this primordial world will be known by others one day. In fact, Hu Yun might not have revealed it unintentionally. Instead, she might have spread it herself. In the future, Hu Yun would spread the fact that he had a primordial world. There is no contradiction between the fact that Hu Yun sincerely wanted to give this primordial world to Luo Fan. The human heart was constantly changing. Hu Yun truly wanted to give this primordial world to Luo Fan and abide by her original agreement. However, as time passed, what happened today would forever be engraved in the depths of her memory. From time to time, it would appear and remind her that she had once obtained such a chance to become a saint. Perhaps she wouldn't feel too much for a short period of time. In fact, she might even feel proud of herself for being able to resist such a temptation. However, as time went on and she recalled it more and more, her mentality would gradually change. Her original pride would gradually turn into disapproval, and in the end, it would even turn into regret. In particular, in the future, her cultivation would inevitably once again fall into a bottleneck, and she would not be able to find any direction to break through. At that time, the scene that happened today would become incomparably profound, and in the end, she would regret it to the extreme. At that time, her feelings towards Luo Fan would change from gratitude to hatred. At that time, it was very clear that she would search for Luo Fan and spread the news that he owned this primordial world. Luo Fan could see this development very clearly. If he didn't have a primordial world, then it would be fine. It would not be difficult for him to seize this primordial world and conveniently wipe out Hu Yun. However, he already had a primordial world. Moreover, he had completely refined the world of hope and fused it with him. In comparison, how could this new primordial world be considered anything? For the sake of such a useless primordial world, it was worth it to wipe out a cultivator that he somewhat admired, or to bear the betrayal that would almost certainly come in the future. Because of this consideration, Luo Fan had no interest in this primordial world at all. Therefore, even though he knew that Hu Yun was sincerely giving this primordial world to him, he only smiled faintly. He raised his hand and pushed the primordial world back. "This world is too precious. I can't accept it. Don't worry, fellow Taoist. I'm definitely sincere. Fellow Taoist, please accept this item," Hu Yun said firmly. She pushed the primordial world towards Luo Fan again. If the level 9 pseudo-sages saw what they were doing, they would definitely be so furious that they would use all their strength to completely wipe them out. One had to know that they were even willing to give up everything they had in exchange for a primordial world like this. Yet, It was being pushed around by two existences that they viewed as ants. That was truly a reckless waste of resources. However, whether it was Luo Fan or Huyun, they did not care what they thought. Between the two of them, one was doing it for the persistence in his heart, while the other did not want to cause trouble in the future. However, neither of them was willing to leave this primordial world. After a while, Luo Fan said, "I will never accept this primordial world. I definitely won't accept it. If fellow Taoist doesn't accept it, then I'll be leaving." As soon as Huyun saw Luo Fan's appearance, she knew how resolute he was. Her expression couldn't help but change. She didn't know whether to push the world or not. She fell into a dilemma. Could Luo Fan break through the many defenses of her primordial world and leave? She did not doubt this at all. Although she was already a level 3 pseudo-sage, she had only just broken through. Not long ago, she was only a level 2 pseudo-sage cultivator. Even though she had become a level 3 pseudo-sage cultivator, she was still unfamiliar with the power and realm that she possessed. It was easy to imagine how much strength she could exert. If she were to face Luo Fan, who had been in the level 3 pseudo-sage for an unknown period of time, even with the help of this primordial world, she did not have much confidence that she could make him stay. If she were to directly accept this primordial world as Luo Fan had said, it would go against her insistence, and she was naturally unwilling to do so. This dilemma caused Huyun's expression to change. She was at a loss as to what to do. Seeing this, Luo Fan chuckled and said, "If fellow Taoist feels bad, why don't you tell me how you obtained this primordial world? Perhaps there is still a primordial world there, and I will take it myself. That way, there won't be any psychological pressure." Huyun frowned and said, "This thing is so precious. How can there be so many? I obtained this primordial world there, so of course there can't be such a primordial world there." This was originally just an excuse for Luo Fan. He did not believe that there was still a primordial world in the place where Huyun took this primordial world. However, although this was what he thought, in order to maintain this excuse, he obviously could not say it. Therefore, he smiled and said, "That's not necessarily true. Since you were able to obtain such a primordial world there, are you sure that the primordial world is the deepest part and the most precious thing there? Perhaps you have overlooked some places, and there might be other things in the deeper parts. If you tell me, maybe I can obtain more and better things than this primordial world." "Ha! This is just a small thought of mine. Fellow Taoist, you won't refuse, right?" Hearing this, Huyun said, "There is no problem telling fellow Taoist where that place is. However, fellow Taoist must have a subordinate for this primordial world. If fellow Taoist says this again, I don't even want to hear where that place is. I'll just turn around and leave." Luo Fan frowned. These words caused Huyun, who was about to continue speaking, to immediately stop. She simply couldn't say anything else. After a while, she put away the primordial world with a conflicted expression and said, "Thank you for fulfilling my wish. This is yours to begin with." "What are you talking about, fulfilling my wish? This is really funny." Seeing that she finally put away the source of her trouble, Luo Fan finally smiled. Huyun smiled bitterly. How could she not know why Luo Fan made that request? However, since the two of them were so insistent, there would be no result even if she continued to pester them. She might as well go with the flow. After thinking for a while, Huyun raised her hand and clapped. Instantly, a world was born in front of her. This world was not a high-level one. It only looked like a small kiliocosm. However, the entire world was extremely vast. It was unknown how many light years it covered. The scene inside was a boundless ocean. Only in the various parts of the ocean could there be a single person. Everywhere in the ocean was dotted with tiny islands. Compared to other normal worlds, this world was extremely strange. The entire world seemed to have no time, or perhaps time was completely stagnant. Everything inside was eternally motionless. Even if it was a gust of wind, a drop of water, or even a cloud, there was no possibility for them to move. The entire world was like a three-dimensional picture. After opening up this world, Huyin casually pointed at a certain part of the void in that world, and a dot of red light flickered there. After doing this, Huyin pushed the world to the front. She pushed it in front of Luo Fan and said, that is where I found this primitive world. Luo Fan took the world. With a slight sense, he clearly sensed everything in the world. He could not help but show a look of admiration on his face. Very good map. That's right. This world was actually a map. It was extremely detailed. The marked area was a map of the tens of thousands of seas around Chungong Island in the Demon Realm. Everything on the map was consistent with everything in the tens of thousands of seas in the Demon Realm. Even the situation on each island was clearly displayed. As long as Luo Fan locked his perception on a certain location, a lot of information about that location would flow into his heart through his perception, and he would easily know where it was. In comparison, such a map, any map that Luo Fan had seen in the past, was completely rubbish. With a thought, he locked his perception on the place where the red dot was flashing. Luo Fan instantly sensed that there were countless layers of restrictions and countless layers of space-time. Amidst the layers of space-time, an incomparably complex and strange place was outlined. It was like a battlefield, a relic, and more like a trap. That place doesn't seem simple. Maybe I can go and take a look when I have time. After seeing everything clearly, Luo Fan was secretly interested. However, it was just a thought. Although he was interested in exploring that place, it was not a big deal. If he passed by it in the future, he might go and explore it. However, he was not interested in going there specifically, at least for now. You flatter me. Huyin smiled faintly. Luo Fan chuckled. With a pat of his hand, the world turned into a scroll and was put into the universe in his sleeve. It was not difficult for cultivators above the Sage-to-Be stage to transform the world into something else. It was even easier for cultivators at Luo Fan's level. All right, let's call it a day. We'll meet again in the future. Luo Fan smiled faintly and said, You've helped me a lot today, but I'm not able to repay you. I'm really ashamed, Huyin said shamefully. As she spoke, the seal on the world disappeared completely. The grayish color that shrouded the entire world split into countless rays of light and returned to the billions of worlds. At this moment, Luo Fan felt that his perception of Chungong Island had regained its original clarity. He felt like he could leave this world at any time if he wanted to. Sensing this, he knew that Huyin had let go of all the obstacles. He could not help but smile and say, What's there to be ashamed of? I didn't do anything. However, before I leave, I have to give you a reminder. I'm all ears. Huyin was startled for a moment before she said solemnly. Due to Luo Fan's previous actions, she had long admired Luo Fan. Therefore, when she heard Luo Fan's reminder, she naturally attached great importance to it. Luo Fan said calmly, After we part ways, you'd better leave Chungong Island as soon as possible. The further, the better. The more hidden, the better. Don't stay for even a moment. It's best if you abandon your original cave abode and go to another place where no one knows about you. Completely conceal yourself and don't come into contact with anyone. You're right. I hope you can leave your aura behind. When I settle down in the future, I'll let you know so that I can keep in touch with you. Huyin said solemnly with a shocked expression. Leave my aura behind? Luo Fan wore a faint smile and said, Do you know why I asked you to leave immediately? Isn't it to prevent others from knowing that I have that thing? Huyin was startled and said, Now that she no longer sealed off this world, it was naturally inappropriate for her to mention the primordial world to prevent its existence from being leaked. Of course, that's part of the reason. However, more importantly, you have to be on guard against another person, Luo Fan said with a faint smile. His expression made Huyun's hair stand on end. She carefully asked, Who are you talking about? The person you have to be on guard against is me, Luo Fan said with a smile. Huyin was stunned by his words. She then laughed and said, Why do you have to scare me? You had such a good opportunity to obtain that thing, but you didn't take it. Why should I be on guard against you? Chapter 1324. After Luo Fan left, Huyin stood there blankly for a while. Then, her entire body trembled and a disappointed expression appeared on her face. Is that really the case? As she thought about it, all kinds of messy thoughts directly drowned her. She actually wanted to tell herself that things would not be like this, that such a thing would definitely not happen. However, as soon as she thought about it, she realized that she could not convince herself at all. Not to mention that she and Luo Fan had just met. Even she herself could not be sure that she would still maintain such thoughts after so many years. At this moment, when she recalled her thoughts when she handed over the primordial world to Luo Fan, she suddenly understood why Luo Fan was unwilling to accept her handing over the primordial world to him. So, he was worried that I would change my mind in the future, regret my decision today, and bring trouble to him instead. No wonder. Hu Yun sighed, and her expression became even more bitter. She still wanted to loudly say that Luo Fan's worries were wrong, that such a thing would never happen. However, deep down in her heart, she faintly knew that such a thing was very likely to happen. After a few years, when she recalled her decision today, it was very likely that she would regret it. At that time, with her mentality, it was very likely that she would have endless hatred for Luo Fan. This is human nature. Even if one is already cultivated to this stage, it is still impossible to avoid this kind of human nature. Hu Yin let out a long sigh and did not leave this world. With a single thought, the world shook slightly. It instantly turned into nothingness. It had directly left the Devil Realm. Of course, although it had left the Devil Realm, it was not completely independent. Instead, it existed in a form similar to the vast thousand worlds that Luo Fan and the other sects of the Azure Temple had been to before. It was located in an extremely mysterious place. This kind of existence was the kind of existence that could only be possessed by a relatively high-level world. A world created by an ordinary cultivator would not be able to achieve this. Just by being able to transfer the world to this state, it was enough to show the depth of Hu Yun's control over the world. And at this time, she used such a method to move the world away. Obviously, she had really listened to Luo Fan's words. He really did, as Luo Fan said. In fact, even if she had the ability to transform the world into that mysterious state, she could not do it for long. It was impossible for her to treat that state as the normal state of the world's existence. However, it only took an instant to enter that state. This was enough for Hu Yun to enter any place in the demon realm with the help of the special state of that world. Of course, at least in theory. In fact, Hu Yun's own knowledge and experience had limited the display of this power. She could only move to places that she had been to before, places that she was familiar with, but she couldn't really do as she pleased. Luo Fan strolled leisurely on Chungong Island. He had sensed the change in Hu Yun's world. His expression changed slightly, and he sighed, "What a pity." However, no one knew what he was feeling regretful about. Sighing, he continued to wander around Chungong Island. A few days later, while he was wandering, he came to an ordinary-looking but extremely spacious building. This seems to be an auction house. Luo Fan's heart skipped a beat. After thinking for a while, he directly walked into the building. This building wasn't built in an ordinary mortal place, so naturally, there weren't any guards here. This place was used to receive cultivators who could easily destroy the world. Unless there was a sufficiently powerful cultivator guarding the door, it would be meaningless. If someone wanted to break in, they could still easily break in. Obviously, the existence of pseudo-saint level was proud. How could they be so humiliated as to serve as a door guard? In that case, there was naturally no need to do anything unnecessary. However, although there were no guards, after entering the door, there was an inexplicable suppressive force that appeared out of nowhere, acting on any cultivator who entered the building through the door. This suppressive force was extremely strange and powerful. Even Luo Fan was extremely shocked. Under this vast suppressive force, Luo Fan even felt that if he wanted to use his divine ability, he would need to expend tens of thousands of times more energy than before. If even he was in such a state, one could imagine how it would be for others. Sensing the suppressive force, Luo Fan instantly knew that this should be a method set up by the pseudo-saint venerate of Chungong Island. This method might not be very effective, but it was enough to remind any cultivator who entered this building that this was the territory of a powerful pseudo-saint that could suppress everyone. If anyone dared to be presumptuous, they would have to bear the consequences themselves. After sensing this change, Luo Fan put this aside and directly walked into the lobby. The interior of this building was much larger than it looked from the outside. Moreover, the entire interior of the building was actually a void. There was a relatively large platform in the middle of the void that was the size of a football field, and there were thousands of smaller platforms densely packed around it. These platforms floated in the void, floating and sinking at the same time. It was an extremely mystical sight. Below the platforms, there wasn't any ground, nor was there any scenery like the surface of the sea. Instead, there was nothing but absolute emptiness and pitch-black darkness. This auction seemed to be auctioning something at this moment. On the huge platform in the center, a greater tier quasi-sage was introducing a strange creature that looked like a long snake. Although this creature was lying there as if it was dead, its essence was extremely high. Luo Fan could vaguely sense that its body contained a power comparable to that of a pseudo-saint. There's actually a pseudo-saint snake that hasn't transformed? What's the secret behind this? Luo Fan could not help but be surprised when he saw the creature. A pseudo-saint creature might be very strong, but it was still considered normal. When it reached a certain level, it was not rare. At least, it was still considered normal. At the very least, there were hundreds of people in this auction at this moment. However, a pseudo-saint creature still maintained its original form and did not transform into a born Taoism body. It did not even look like a creature with much intelligence. This was something that Luo Fan had never seen before. At this moment, he suddenly saw such a strange creature in front of him. Luo Fan could not help but be interested. Luo Fan entered. As if he had triggered some sort of rule of the auction house, a strange platform materialized under his feet and carried him into the thousands of platforms. He seemed to be floating between the thousands of platforms. There was a table on this platform. It was a very comfortable table. It was a very grand chair, and there were countless melons, fruits, and fine wine on the table. The service was far more perfect than one could imagine. Coming here, one could really say that one felt at home for such a change. Luo Fan's eyes flickered, and he accepted it calmly. To mortals, such a method was naturally unimaginably mysterious and was definitely the work of an immortal. However, to him, it was nothing special. What was there to be surprised about? Sitting on a grand chair, the voice of the great accomplishment quasi-sage on the central platform became several times clearer than usual. Even the strange snake she was introducing became much clearer. Just as Luo Fan sat down, a cultivator made a bid for the strange snake. Of course, although it was a bid, it was still a barter. It was similar to the outside world, and there was no real equivalent to measure the value of the item. A look of hesitation appeared on the woman's face. She seemed to feel that the item offered by the bidder did not match the value of the strange snake. As such, she could not decide to exchange the strange snake with the item offered by the bidder. Soon, another person made a bid. In the end, the great accomplishment quasi-sage made a comparison and seemed to communicate with someone somewhere. Then, she decided to exchange the strange snake with the item offered by the bidder. It's quite an interesting way of auction, but only if both sides of the auction are powerful cultivators would they be able to use this method of auction. In the mortal world, how could it be done to this step? Luo Fan understood the trading method of the auction and couldn't help but sigh. Next, the great accomplishment quasi-sage waved her hand, and another item appeared on the platform. Then, there was a torrent of praises just like that. One auction item after another was taken out. Most of them were creatures of all kinds, while the rest were treasures, elixirs, magic arts, and so on. Among the many auction items, most of them were sold successfully, but there were also many that were not sold. Either no one bid for them, or the items offered by the bidders were not enough to satisfy the auction house, so they were not sold. However, even if the item was not sold, neither the auctioneer nor anyone else reacted strangely. It was as if this was nothing out of the ordinary. This was actually quite normal. How could it be so easy to find an exchange that would satisfy both parties when it came to bartering? Naturally, there were many items that neither party was satisfied with. It was only natural for such an auction to be left unsold. Luo Fan didn't participate in this process. Among the auction items, even if there were many treasures that were extremely valuable, he didn't feel anything for them. He didn't feel anything. Not many of them had any desires. Since he didn't have any desires, he naturally wouldn't waste his time looking for something of equal value to exchange for it. As a matter of fact, he did not come to this auction house to obtain anything specific. His real purpose for coming here was to see how auctions were conducted on Chunggong Island, and also to see what was being auctioned here. After a few days, Luo Fan felt that he had gained a lot. An auction in a mortal world would only last a few hours at most, but for the cultivation world, it was impossible for it to be so short. It was normal for auctions to last a few days, months, or even years. Not only did he understand how the auctions in the cultivation world worked, but he also understood what the cultivators in the Devil Realm thought was the most valuable thing. So it's magic treasures. The most valuable things in the Devil Realm. So it's magic treasures. After a few days, Luo Fan's eyes lit up as he thought to himself. What he saw and heard in the past few days made him very clear on this point. Over the past few days, thousands of items were auctioned. Among them, there were 700 to 800 items that were not sold because the auctioneer wasn't satisfied with the price. However, there wasn't a single item that was left unsold. Cultivators had taken out magic treasures to exchange for it. That was to say, generally speaking, as long as the cultivator took out a magic treasure to exchange for it, almost every exchange would be successful. Even if the greater mastery quasi-sage indicated that the value of the item was much higher than the magic treasure, most of the transactions were successful. This situation was enough to show that the Devil Realm, the most important thing, it was magic treasures. With a thought in his mind, an inexplicable thought appeared in Luo Fan's mind. With a thought, countless changes occurred in the entire Devil Realm. In the end, he pointed at a spot in the void in front of him. In the blink of an eye, a dazzling golden ball condensed there. The aura of a half-step pseudo-sage treasure was emitted from the ball, but it was quickly suppressed by the powerful and vast suppressive force in the auction house. It didn't leak out at all. As expected, Luo Fan was not surprised by such a change. Then, with another thought, countless changes occurred. Amidst the many changes, the half-step pseudo-sage treasure that had just been born in front of him. This caused the half-step pseudo-sage treasure to vibrate slightly, and its level continued to rise. In this way, after thousands of times, this half-step pseudo-sage treasure broke through the shackles of the half-step pseudo-sage level and truly stepped into the level of a level. One pseudo-sage. When this magic treasure reached the level, one pseudo-sage level, Luo Fan stopped. This magic treasure was refined by Luo Fan according to the method of refining magic treasures given by Hu Yun. It did not carry any aura of the refiner. It could be completely refined by any living creature or cultivator. Moreover, it was a magic treasure that was refined step by step from the simplest materials, just like a magic treasure that he had refined from scratch. If such a magic treasure was obtained by any half-step pseudo-sage cultivator, they could use it to become a pseudo-sage in a very short period of time. It could be said that this magic treasure was not just a magic treasure, but a hope to become a pseudo-sage. After refining this magic treasure, Luo Fan thought in his mind, and the platform naturally changed. A small teleportation platform appeared in front of him. There were many words on the platform, which recorded how to participate in the auction. This was actually the biggest source of auction items in this auction. Otherwise, with the financial resources of the auction house, no matter how rich it would not be able to casually take out so many items that could attract the attention of pseudo-sage and quasi-sage existences. Only by letting the participants of the auction take out some items to auction could the auction house continue to operate for a long time. As for the commission of the auction house itself, compared to other places, it did not have that. After all, if there was no general equivalent, how could it take commission? However, even if there was no commission, there was no need to worry that the auction house would not gain anything. In fact, for a true cultivator, material gains were secondary. The truly precious gains were the growth of insight and the harvest of knowledge. For the auction house, getting to know and see these auction items at a close distance was already a great gain for them. Since the participants of the auction had to provide the auction items, the design of the platform naturally had corresponding arrangements. This platform that appeared according to his will was one of those arrangements. Luo Fan glanced at the words and instantly understood the use of this platform. He smiled faintly and placed the Grade 1 pseudo-sage treasure in front of him on the teleportation platform. Then, he casually left some information on the magic treasure and activated the magical function of the teleportation platform. The magic treasure instantly disappeared in front of him. At the same time, the major accomplishment quasi-sage on the platform seemed to have sensed something, and a look of surprise flashed across her face. However, she quickly returned to normal and continued with the auction that she had just been carrying out. On the surface, this auction was no different from the previous one. However, this great perfection quasi-sage seemed to be in a hurry. Very soon, he sold the auction item at a lower price than usual. As the auction item disappeared, the platform that was the size of a football field shone brightly, and a golden sphere appeared on the platform. This sphere was shining with golden light and emitted an extremely strong aura that belonged to a Grade 1 pseudo-sage. It was the Grade 1 pseudo-sage treasure that Luo Fan had just refined. She actually attaches so much importance to this magic treasure. It seems like the refining method of the magic treasure that Huyun obtained back then is quite mysterious. Luo Fan thought to himself with a faint smile on his face. He was not surprised that the Grade 1 pseudo-sage treasure could emit such a strong aura on the central platform, but not a trace of aura was emitted from the platform he was on. Chapter 1325. This magic treasure is a Grade 1 pseudo-sage treasure that a guest submitted just now. Although it's only a Grade 1 pseudo-sage treasure, its value far surpasses that of a Grade 5 pseudo-sage treasure. The Great Accomplishment Quasi-Sage explained endlessly on the platform. She was originally a beautiful woman. Now that she was so excited and nervous that her face was flushed, the degree of her beauty had at least doubled. If there was an ordinary person here and they saw her appearance, they might be so infatuated by her beauty that they would lose themselves. However, there were no ordinary people here. Even the weakest cultivator was a sage to be. Naturally, they would not act too differently just because of her appearance. What they were concerned about was why the Great Accomplishment Quasi-Sage was so excited. A Grade 1 pseudo-sage treasure was comparable to a Grade 5 pseudo-sage treasure. This was probably not something that could be made under ordinary circumstances. This definitely meant that this magic treasure was extremely special, enough for a knowledgeable Great Accomplishment Quasi-Sage to say such a thing. Under such circumstances, everyone was paying attention to what the Great Accomplishment Quasi-Sage was about to say. The Great Accomplishment Quasi-Sage suppressed her excitement and said, "That's right. Guests, you didn't hear wrongly. This judgment was not made by me, but by the appraisers of our auction house." His words caused everyone to focus their attention on him. They were even more concerned about what she was about to say next. I think some guests already know what kind of magic treasure this is. That's right. This magic treasure is an embryonic magic treasure. After being refined by any cultivator, it will become a magic treasure that is completely compatible with the cultivator. It will not have any aura of the refiner or any remnant of the refiner's cultivation technique. The Major Completion Quasi-Sage said loudly. For some reason, there was an indescribable thirst in her voice. Her words also allowed everyone to understand why this woman was so emotional. Although she was an auctioneer of the auction house and was experienced and knowledgeable, she had another identity. However, she had another identity. She was a Great Accomplishment Quasi-Sage, a quasi-sage who had yet to set foot on the 9 steps below the sage stage. She was facing difficulties in becoming a pseudo-sage. Under such circumstances, this embryonic magic treasure that could allow any half-step holy transformation cultivator to break through to the holy transformation stage was placed right in front of her, and it was extremely tempting to her. It was easy to imagine. It was no wonder that she was so excited. It's indeed worthy of a grade 5 pseudo-sage treasure. A leisurely sigh was heard at this moment. Then, the shadow of a magic treasure appeared on the central platform. It was a magic treasure that looked like a triangular flag. As the flag fluttered, space-time ripples swirled around it, faintly discernible. There seemed to be countless illusory worlds taking form within it, yet they were destroyed at the instant they were unable to completely reveal their truth. Such a cycle repeated over and over again, and it seemed extremely miraculous. At the same time, a powerful aura spread from the platform and shrouded the entire auction house. This aura was tens of thousands of times stronger than the level 1 pseudo-sage treasure refined by Luo Fan that was released by the Great Accomplishment Quasi-Sage. It had even distorted the void, changed time, and caused the laws of the universe to slightly shift. This was the aura of a grade 5 pseudo-sage treasure. The existence of such an aura clearly meant that the magic treasure shadow was a real grade 5 pseudo-sage treasure. Only a level 5 pseudo-holy treasure like this could release such a terrifying level 5 pseudo-holy aura. I'm willing to exchange this grade 5 pseudo-sage world flag for this grade 1 pseudo-sage embryonic magic treasure. The voice that praised the value of this magic treasure was comparable to a grade 5 pseudo-sage treasure sounded. Right at this moment, another voice resounded. This time, I can't give it to you, fellow Taoists. Following that, the shadow of a seal appeared on the platform. Facing the world flag from afar, the seal was emitting a green light. There seemed to be countless shadows of living beings being born and destroyed. At the same time, there was also an aura of a level 5 pseudo-sage level being exuded from the treasure, crushing the treasure of the world flag. This caused the originally calm auction space to become turbulent, and all kinds of strange lights and shadows flashed in the void. There seemed to be countless worlds in these lights and shadows, and there seemed to be countless living beings in these worlds. However, these living beings were not born from these worlds. Instead, they seemed to be thrown into these worlds by the enemies of these worlds. As soon as they were born, they began to destroy crazily, as if they were simply enemies of the world. Among the countless worlds, there were some worlds that were powerful enough to suppress the living beings. However, there were some worlds where the living beings' power surpassed the world and completely destroyed the world. In this way, there were billions of worlds, but overall, the conflict between the two sides was roughly balanced. Neither side could really suppress the other. Obviously, their strength was equal, but the battle was quite fierce. However, although it seemed that the women's rights had changed the entire auction space, and even caused the entire auction space to shake, it did not affect any of the platforms in the auction space. In comparison, the platforms did not seem to be floating in the void. Instead, they seemed to have some kind of unimaginable power suppressing these worlds, making them extremely stable. There was even a feeling that they would not be shaken or destroyed, even if the world was destroyed. Since the two of you are interested, I can't fall behind either. At this moment, another female voice was heard. Following that, the shadow of another magic treasure appeared on the central platform that was the size of a football field. The shadow of this magic treasure was in the shape of a piece of cloth. However, there were billions of things flickering on the surface of this piece of cloth. Those things seemed to form an incomparably vast and incomparably perfect world. Waves of the aura of a level 5 pseudo-sage constantly gathered from the shadow of the cloth, joining the chaos that had already reached a certain level in the entire auction hall, causing the already chaotic scene to become even more chaotic. The situation of the battles between the worlds and living beings became confusing and difficult to distinguish. It became an inexplicable chaos. The battles between the worlds and living beings. the battles between the worlds, the living beings against the worlds, the living beings against the living beings. This was the situation of intense competition and fighting. When Luo Fan stepped into the auction hall, it was his first time seeing it. And this. It was all for a level 1 pseudo-sage magic treasure that he had casually refined, or a level 1 pseudo-sage embryonic magic treasure. This made Luo Fan a little dumbfounded. But are there any more? He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was a little looking forward to it. In this state of mind, he did not choose any of them, but waited quietly. This was actually a normal approach. Since he had taken out to auction, wasn't it because he wanted to wait for the highest bid to sell it? Therefore, he did not choose any of them, but no one felt that it was wrong. It's really lively. Why not join in? An old man said with a chuckle. As he spoke, a wooden stick suddenly appeared on the platform. This wooden stick was divided into 81 sections, and each section was engraved with some kind of extremely abstract but extremely sinister pattern. With a total of 81 segments fused together, the surroundings of the wooden stick seemed to have turned into a chaotic state that was constantly changing. Even time and space seemed to have been shattered by a power that was clearly known to be extremely dangerous, but could not be identified at all. Similarly, at the same time, a powerful aura that belonged to a level 5 pseudo-sage powerhouse was emitted from the wooden stick. It filled the entire auction space and joined the chaotic battle of auras that had previously become extremely chaotic. With the addition of this aura, the already chaotic battle of auras became even more chaotic. In the endless world, all sorts of strange tribulations were born. Some were targeted at living beings, some were targeted at the world, and some were targeted at nothing. They were simply there to vent their anger. 81 sections, 81 tribulations, so that's how it is. This magic treasure is quite interesting. When Luo Fan saw the wooden stick, his eyes couldn't help but light up. It was the first time he had the thought of obtaining the magic treasure in the shape of a wooden stick. The 4 magic treasures were all level 5 pseudo-sage magic treasures. Usually, among the cultivators present, those who had not reached level 5 pseudo-sage would not be able to see even one of them. Now that they found 4 of them directly in front of them and were engaged in such an intense battle of auras, many of the cultivators present suddenly felt a little disappointed and excited at the same time. The reason for their disappointment was very simple. Almost all of them were interested in that embryonic magic treasure. Those who were at the pseudo-sage level were either interested in it for their descendants or to study the refinement method of that magic treasure. As for those who had not yet reached the pseudo-sage level, it was even simpler. This embryonic magic treasure was not a magic treasure at all. It was a living key to the pseudo-sage level. How could they not want to get it? Obviously, this was what they were disappointed about. Although the embryonic magic treasure was very important to them, they could not give away a magic treasure that was above level 5 pseudo-sage. At this moment, there were 4 level 5 pseudo-sage magic treasures competing, which obviously meant that the embryonic magic treasure was not fated with them. How could they not be disappointed? It was even simpler for them to be excited about it. Level 5 pseudo-sage magic treasures were very rare. Fighting in front of them like this was simply giving them a chance to comprehend the mysteries of level 5 pseudo-sage magic treasures. If they could gain even a little bit from it, it would be of great benefit to their cultivation. How could they not be excited? Sigh. I originally wanted to pay a smaller price, but I didn't expect the competition to be so fierce. I have no choice but to bleed. At this moment, a voice that was completely different from the previous 4 echoed in the auction space. Even with the suppression of the auction house, this voice still displayed a might that exceeded one's imagination. In an instant, it completely suppressed the intense aura that permeated the entire auction space, causing the frightening aura battle scene to instantly disappear. They separated and shrank back into the 4 magic treasures. This is level 7 pseudo-sage. Luo Fan was shocked. To be able to completely suppress the aura of a level 5 pseudo-sage with just a voice, even a level 6 pseudo-sage cultivator would find it difficult to do so. To be able to do this so easily, the person who spoke had to be at least level 7 pseudo-sage. Even level 7 pseudo-sage magic treasures are interested in this so-called embryonic magic treasure. Luo Fan was secretly shocked. At this moment, a brush suddenly appeared on the central platform. As soon as this brush appeared, everything in the world appeared around it. Even countless rules and laws that were originally invisible emerged. Vaguely, there were all sorts of strange things, things that could be described, and things that could not be described. Then, an overwhelming aura that belonged to a level 6 pseudo-sage magic treasure appeared. The brush emitted an aura that belonged to a level 6 pseudo-sage magic treasure. It filled the entire auction space. Faintly, the entire auction space seemed to have suddenly lost its original appearance, as if it had fallen into a boundless world. Luo Fan even saw living beings on the ground below, as if they were looking up at the many platforms in the sky. Level 6 pseudo-sage magic treasure. Is this good or bad? Luo Fan sighed. At this moment, he also knew that it was impossible for anything good to be displayed. He immediately activated the array of the teleportation platform according to the previous instructions on the teleportation platform. In an instant, on the central platform, the level 1 pseudo-sage cultivator, whose face was flushed with excitement, fear, and regret, seemed to have received the news. He said respectfully, "That customer is very satisfied with this bid. This transaction is successful. A level 1 pseudo-sage embryonic magic treasure will be exchanged for a level 6 pseudo-sage pin-shaped magic treasure." No one objected to his words. Even the 4 people who had fought intensely for the treasure didn't object to it. They had taken out a level 5 pseudo-sage magic treasure, which was already comparable in value to the level 1 pseudo-sage embryonic magic treasure. In fact, it even slightly surpassed it. If they were asked to pay a higher price, they would not do it. Whether the cultivator who took out the level 6 pseudo-sage treasure was a level 7 pseudo-sage cultivator or a level 6 pseudo-sage cultivator, since he was willing to take out the level 6 pseudo-sage treasure, it meant that he had won. What else could they say? Without any signs of life, the shadows of the 4 level 5 pseudo-sage treasures that had been fighting on the central platform flickered slightly and disappeared without a trace. Obviously, they had been taken back by the 4 cultivators. Following that, the shadow of the pen-shaped magic treasure also disappeared. After a short while, a very ordinary-looking brush appeared out of thin air on the teleportation platform in front of Luo Fan. It didn't seem to have any special features at all. On the central platform, the level 1 pseudo-sage treasure that Luo Fan had refined also disappeared at this moment. It seemed to have been sent to one of the thousands of platforms. As for which one it was, Luo Fan could not be sure at this time. In his opinion, there were at most level 5 pseudo-sage cultivators in this auction house. There was not even a level 7 pseudo-sage cultivator. However, it was clearly a level 7 pseudo-sage cultivator who made a move just now. How could he be sure where the level 7 pseudo-sage cultivator was? Raising his hand to pick up the level 6 pseudo-sage treasure, Luo Fan could not help but exclaim in admiration. This level 6 pseudo-sage treasure was really mysterious. Not only was it powerful, but it also had endless uses. With a slight sense, Luo Fan could tell that this magic treasure was actually a treasure of creation. As long as this magic treasure was activated, it could create everything in the world, including the universe and space-time. There was no aura belonging to its original owner in this magic treasure, nor was there any mark belonging to the other party. The spirituality of the entire magic treasure was completely integrated with the magic treasure itself, but it did not show any spirituality. Luo Fan's heart stirred slightly, and he naturally left his own imprint at the core of the source of this magical weapon. As the mark was left, the magic treasure immediately became free to do whatever he wanted. He picked up the brush and started to sketch. A figure appeared in front of him. This figure was very ordinary, but the aura it emitted was at the level 3 pseudo-sage level. Fortunately, there was a powerful suppression force on this platform. When the aura of this living being spread out, There was naturally a powerful suppression that directly acted on this living being. This prevented the aura of this living being from leaking out and being sensed by others. What a wonderful magic treasure. Unfortunately, this is activated by the realm. My cultivation realm is only at the level 3 pseudo-sage level, so the living being that I can create is at most level 3 pseudo-sage. He raised his hand and patted it lightly. The figure instantly collapsed and turned into nothingness. The power of this level 6 pseudo-sage treasure was quite strong. Its design could even directly create level 6 pseudo-sage living beings. The reason why it could only create level 3 pseudo-sage living beings was because it was limited by Luo Fan's cultivation realm. If Luo Fan's current cultivation realm was already at the level 6 pseudo-sage, the living being that he created with the help of this magic treasure would not be a level 3 pseudo-sage, but a level 6 pseudo-sage.